This is the Vision 79 podcast, where my friend Sander and myself, Mason, discuss recent developments in our business and our personal growth. The name Vision 79 comes from our respective racing numbers. Sander's is 40, mine is 39, and together we have a shared vision for success in business and our personal lives. Many successful people have started small, just like we are, but very few of them have documented their early years. They often say they wish they had, and given we believe in learning lessons from others, we intend to be the first to document our journey from start to finish. Today is episode 39, which is my racing number, so we have something a little bit different today.
Yes, so in this episode, we're going to be talking about where Mason started, where he is today, and where he feels as though he's going, how he's getting there, what challenges he's faced, stuff like that. I have a few questions outlined for him. Mason has seen the questions, but there's also a tidbit at the end that Mason has not seen. It'll be easy. Don't worry. It should be fun. Should be a good time. So a little commemorative number 39 episode. In addition to this, we are one away from being double of what 1% of podcasts even get to. Yeah, in terms of episode number. So that's pretty cool. Next week we'll be at that point. So without further ado, why don't you start us off with your life and business updates?
Sure. So my business updates, the project that I've been working on, this is what I've been doing for like the last year. We were sitting in a meeting and someone was explaining how the program works to me and my team. And I pointed out a flaw and I was like, shouldn't someone be like paying attention to that? And they were like, yep, yeah, someone should. And I was like, well, that's stupid that no one is. And so my boss was like, you should be that person, Mason. And I was like, I don't know how to do that. And he was like, I'll help you learn. So he's helped me learn. And we're at the point now where I've created a process. It's like a review process to ensure that what we're doing like meets guidelines and stuff like that. And that we're not overstepping our bounds. And that has to be verified by the chief engineer and vice president of our program.
Oh, cool.
So I've been working with them like indirectly, like I'm sending them drafts back and forth. But
Is that why you asked me about the car the other week? Is it in relation to this?
No, that's actually something different, but that's he is the Northrop Grumman vice president.
Oh,
This guy is my program vice president.
Cool.
So like the strike fight.
I used to maintain his car. I didn't even know. I thought it was just like Joe Schmo with a nice Porsche. I was like, yeah, sure, I'll do an oil change. Hey, he's a nice guy. Yeah, he's super nice. Yeah. His car's cool too.
He is like the vice president of Northrop Grumman. The guy I'm working with is the vice president of Strike, which is the Northrop Grumman We Bomb People division. So I had a meeting with him on Thursday in which I needed to like sit down and hash out some problems we have in the document to get his signature on it to take it to the customer for them to sign. And he is my boss's 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 boss. So he's like my great grand boss. And I was supposed to go with my boss and his boss. And we had to change the meeting time and now they can't go. So they're like, hey, you're going to have to do this on your own. Please just don't fuck it up. Just don't fuck it up. And I was like, okay. And so I did a little bit of preparation. I did literally like 10 minutes of Googling him just to try to learn more about him. What are his likes and dislikes? What are his interests? What's his background? And I was chatting with my boss about it before he left for the day. And I was like, did you know that, his dog is named Bernoulli and he lives in, Satellite Beach and he got Yard of the Month for his HOA. He's a foodie. He's got a blog for sketches that he draws. And he was like, what the fuck are you doing? I was like, I'm just trying to learn about him. Like I'm preparing like to meet with like that. This is how I would do it if I were doing sales, to do a quick background search. Right. And he was like, yeah, that's not fucking normal, dude. And I was like, it's 15 minutes, but it's an hour-long meeting with someone who's important. And he was like, all right, man, like just don't tell him that you fucking Googled him beforehand. And I was like, no, of course not. I'm just going to like, now I know what he's interested in, so I can naturally bring that up in conversation because I know he's interested in it. Yeah. I was like, all right. But the meeting went well. And afterwards he messaged me and he was like, hey, awesome job. Like, I'm really happy with how you did that. So if I didn't have a promotion in the bag, I for sure do now, which is great.
Good.
I also put $50 in Dogecoin a few weeks ago. I bought in at 34 cents and then Elon Musk started the Dogecast and now it's at 45 cents, which is sick.
Cool.
And then
I into crypto this week too. That's one of my updates.
Yeah. I when I signed up for Coinbase, I got like $3 of Bitcoin for free. And that was at 67,000 a coin. And now it's in the 90s, I think 91 right now.
Yeah. Very nice.
Yeah. So, and then my last thing is I did have a meeting with our and now my investor this week.
Yes.
And we're making a couple changes and a couple minor flexes. So now I have to learn about how loans and collateral work between several parties, and how can I protect that if I put it under a business.
Okay.
So I'm now doing research into what does that look like and what does that mean.
Got it.
Um, so yeah, business is good. How's your business?
Good. So this week I have, in terms of updates, completed my Forex courses. So approximately 50 pages of notes in correspondence to about 35 courses.
Cool.
So completed that. Drop shipping stuff. I created a product, how to find a product cheat sheet, which I'm going to be working on finding a product tonight. We're doing more research. I've been working on it, but kind of finalizing it stuff. I created a spreadsheet too to help me out with that, based off of an older spreadsheet that I had.
You don't want to do the cat page, the cat
I
site?
think I do. I just really want to confirm it down because I learned a few other things too, and I kind of want to like really sift through nicely before I just kind of like throw something at it.
Got it.
So I have a couple parameters I want to look at and stuff like that.
Cool.
So,
I would be interested if you want to share on the podcast when you find the information.
oh
What makes the cat thing a good or bad idea?
yeah, yeah. I sure no, I don't mind.
Okay.
Essentially, when you're looking for a product in general, you want something that is um quick to for people to buy. So easy to buy. So A, your web page has to look professional and stuff like that. But B, and more importantly, maybe as importantly, the price has to be attainable on an impulse basis. So like under 20 to 25 bucks is something that someone can impulse buy and not think about too much. So, and once you get above 25 bucks, you get people starting to research where can they find it cheaper, stuff like that. And so that pulls them off of your page. And maybe there's a competitor out there that has it for a few bucks less, and then you lose the sale. So you want an impulse buy point. You want it as a niche product focused on a specific target group that has a passion for something. So, like, let's say you were doing, I don't know, bows and arrows or cats, right? If you're doing like sporting stuff, right? You want to look at like a niche sporting thing and something that you cannot find in stores, right? So, like, I've personally never seen like a quality bow and arrow set up at a store. Maybe there are stores out there, but I don't know of them. I know there are probably bow and arrow stores online, but like you can't go into like a traditional store and buy a bow and arrow setup. Maybe there's like, entry level bows and arrows out there. That doesn't really meet the low price criteria potentially. But my point being is like with cat products, which is a better example, the bow and arrow is kind of on the fly thing. With the cat products, it's something that there are good cat toys in stores, but there's not every cat toy in every store. And some stores don't even have certain cat toys at all.
Right.
So some stuff is online based only, which leaves the room for job shippers to make money off of that. So essentially, it's a niche product. Cat people love buying stuff for their cats. I have fallen victim to two drop shipping stores for my cats. They're cool products that you can't find in stores. They're relatively cheap. It targets a certain niche. Some of those products can have a certain wow factor, like, oh, I didn't know that existed, or, oh, I didn't know that, they made toys do this, right?
Right.
So there's that aspect of it too. And then there's a couple others too that I'm probably blanking on, but I think that hits like the gist of it. So part of what I'm actually want to do is I have all these notes about drop shipping and I have all these notes about Forex and stuff like that. And I'm working through actually implementing them and getting my feet going. I think once I'm getting my role going, I want to sell my actual notes templates like online as like hey, like this is what I did. This is material from several different courses that I took.
Right.
This is a compilation of that material. Here's the binder available online or a physical copy. Here you go. Right. I think that'd be something cool. Something I did yesterday was I ordered binders earlier this week. And I put all like my Forex crypto dropshipping notes, so like in nice plastic sheets in those binders so that I can access them and carry them with me and stuff like that. Because sometimes it's hard having multiple windows open and scrolling and stuff like that. I feel like a physical copy is just easily tangible. And then I'm going to tape some major ones up on the wall in front of me so I can reference them quickly and stuff like that, and made like cheat sheets and stuff like that. So just kind of working through. I'm kind of doing something similar to where we're working on the business together, where it's like working along it, but also creating a system in place as we go.
Yeah.
So that I can potentially sell the system and also make my life easier down the line. Because I think I'm spending a little bit more time on the forefront to save it on the latter part, right? So if I do a really good job with the product, stuff and I really figure out my bearings from there, I think the latter part will be easier because I've done several Shopify stores and, I know how to run the ads and make posts and stuff like that. I think that back end stuff will be easy. The front end stuff is, I think, where I have less experience and also where it's more valuable because everything you do on the front end, everything you do on the back end directly correlates to the quality of the front end.
Right.
So that's what part of the stuff I've been doing this week. In addition to that, we have ordered shirts.
Yeah.
So those are on the way. If you ordered one and you're watching, it's coming to you soon. Actually, probably by the time this releases, you should already hopefully have your shirt. If you don't, message us. But yeah, uploading some podcast stuff. I did a tiny bit of work on the Miata. I got the top warranted. So I'm getting a brand new top, 430, all shipped to me. Yep. So the top guarantee went through. Yep. This is the second time. So that will be my third top on the car.
Yeah.
But I mean, they keep sending them and I keep warrantying them because it's stitching shit, even though it's a $800 top for all of you saying I bought an eBay top in the comments. Actually, no one's saying that in the comments, but
no comment.
Those comments, if you all think I'm putting an eBay top on, no, I'm putting a $800 Robbins top on it and the stitching sucks. So Robbins, if you're watching, your stitching sucks. Anyways, third top for the car in 5 years. So that'll be fun. And then my squirrels are getting big. I bought them berries this week. They love their berries. I bought them different nuts and stuff. I put them around. I hid them so they have to find them and stuff like that. Yeah.
Enrichment.
Yes. Enrichment exercise in their 12 by 6 foot pen.
But for a squirrel, that's a big area.
Yeah, I know. They're having fun. They're enjoying themselves. So they like their berries and the nuts I got them and stuff like that. And the cats enjoy watching them. So I thought I had something else about cats too. I wrote cats on here like a specific line item, but I don't know. Probably covers most of it.
I mean,
What else? So you want to dive into the main body?
Sure.
Or do you have more stuff? I
had just one.
Yeah. Go for it. Sorry.
A good friend of mine died over the summer at Northrop Grumman.
Oh,
you know this guy.
Okay.
Or you know of him.
Yeah.
But he was like 32 and he got back cancer. He died of cancer. So Grace and I started seeing a doctor. And the first thing that she did was she was like, I want to see your blood work. And I was like, I've never given blood before. I have once, but I didn't get the results back. So she had us go give blood, and I have twice the amount of cholesterol that is a regular amount.
Okay. So you know if it's LDL or HDL?
The one that is bad to be high is high, and the one that's bad to be low is low. So
I've heard a lot of mixed stuff about cholesterol, though.
Me too. And so
I'm sorry to interrupt you.
Yeah.
A lot of doctors will say that, like LDL should not be high, and HDL should be low.
Yeah,
I think it's high density is HDL and then low density is LDL.
Mm-hmm.
But in fact, if you're eating a lot of protein and meats, your LDL will be naturally higher. And it's not necessarily the cholesterol level in your blood that is bad. It's the size of the particles of cholesterol that are bad, because that's what causes clotting or buildup and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And so there's a lot of actually great talk on Joe Rogan about LDL and HDL. I'll send you a couple links, but it's very interesting. And actually there's a couple other correlations. Like you see this common graph of like as LDL goes up, your risk of heart disease goes up and something like that. But that, I don't remember the exact thing on that data. This was like a year ago, but that data has several other factors underneath that are not accounted for in that. And by and large, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, that as you become more obese, like clinically obese, your LDL will naturally go up as well. And so in that graph, there's not a distinction between like who is obese and who just has a higher LDL, right? And once you start to even out for that, yes, there is a very small increase, but it is so minute, like it's almost non-existent. Like you would have to have levels of cholesterol that are even beyond possible to have a even measurable increase in risk of like heart disease and stuff like that.
Yeah, that graph changes based on your insulin dependency and your ability to produce insulin.
That sounds very familiar.
So the fatter you are, the worse you get at producing insulin. And so higher up it goes for heart disease. But Grace immediately was like, oh, well, we're going to go and see like what she wants to do, our doctor. And I was like, yeah. And I was like, I'm not going on pills though. Like, just so you know right now. And she was like, well, if they want to put you on pills, like that's what you got to do. And I was like, no, ma'am. I was like, I don't fucking think so. And I'm not going on statins.
Especially with all those shit lately with pharmaceutical drug companies and all that stuff, just trying to make money off the population. Yeah. I mean, we could do a really like controversial deep dive on pharmaceutical drugs and, vaccines as of late and stuff like that. But I think the point being is like there's a lot of money behind solving problems that may not have to exist in the first place.
Yeah.
I think that's the point.
Well, and I think that a lot of health problems can be solved.
And there's a lot of
with
great
diet and
doctors too.
exercise.
Like there's a lot of great stuff, but it's mixed in with these people who are just out to make money off of everyone.
Right. Well, and I think there's a lot of doctors that think they're doing the right thing because they were taught to just like,
Yeah.
oh, well, this problem solved with
Yes.
this pill. And they're like, okay, like it's the job,
Yeah. It's super common at hospitals. Like nurses will run around just like taking doctor orders or like a head person's orders. And then saw this interview with this nurse. She was talking about some treatment that she was giving. It was like a cancer related treatment. And she was like, I was giving the same treatment for 10 years and I never bothered to question why, like the patients were continuously getting like lower insulin. I'll just say an example. It's probably not true. I'm just trying to get the point across. Like I didn't know, like, I never bothered to ask why the insulin levels were dropping after this treatment. And then the pharmaceutical drug companies would just come in and like and give an insulin booster to, pump that back up. Like I never figured out why. And I never thought, like, I never even stopped to think what other treatments we could do to avoid this problem instead of just putting the patient on a bunch of drugs to like counteract each other.
Solve your
Because
drug
she's
issue with
just
more
so
drugs.
busy at the hospital, she just does whatever she's told from the top.
Yeah.
And like she spent a decade doing that. And it wasn't a dumb person. Like her interview was good. She was super smart. Like this was an intelligent person that was just so caught up in the system and so caught up of like just trying to get stuff done because it's so bustling that like she never even stopped to think critically about it until, obviously the podcast. But that took 10 years. And most people probably don't even get there in their lifetime.
Yeah. It's like the thing at work that I mentioned a couple minutes ago where it's like, oh, we're doing this thing. And I was like, is no one tracking that?
Yeah.
And they were like, no one's tracking it. And I was like, shouldn't someone be? And they were like, yeah, probably. Right. It's like, if we're having to solve our drug issue with more drugs, what can we do to stop the drugs in the first place? Right.
Mm-hmm.
But from what I've looked into so far, I mean, my levels aren't like high. They're like over double what they should be. So it's like as far as it's like half the meter is green and half of it is red. And I'm at the far end. And then there's like a plus symbol for how fucking high it is. And my dad has high cholesterol, but he didn't have high cholesterol until he started drinking a lot and put on a bunch of weight. So now he's on blood pressure meds to lower his blood pressure because his cholesterol is high. But my blood pressure is perfect and my resting heart rate is good and my metabolism is healthy.
I want to send you some stuff about LDL and HDL because your situation now sounds very similar to many I've heard about where they get prescribed prescription drugs to try and lower the blood pressure, to try and drop the LDL count and stuff like this. But when in reality, every single other vital is good. So why ignore the fact that you're overall super healthy and then just try to throw drugs at your system to get this one thing down when in overall there might be another layer there that's just not being exposed. I'll send you some stuff.
Yeah.
I listened to a lot of it like a year ago and I was like, this is super interesting. This is awesome. I'll know what this is to bring it up to someone when the time comes. And obviously you put those things on a shelf waiting to use them and then you forget them by the time it's actually useful to use them. But I'll send you some stuff. I at least know where to find it. I know what to look for.
Everyone, when you grow up, you're like, oh, high cholesterol means heart disease, right?
Right.
And so I remember hearing something a while back that was like, actually, that's got nothing to do with it. Like a large part of it is how obese you are. And so when I saw the blood charts, I was like, oh, okay, like maybe that's what it is. And Grace was like, that's a problem. And I was like, I don't think so. Like from what I remember, I don't think that high cholesterol is a big deal if you're healthy otherwise, right?
Yes. That's what, from my simple understanding and memory, that is what I understand.
Yeah. And right now I'm on 0 drugs. I take a couple vitamins. Actually, it's funny. The only other bar in my blood test chart that was in the red was creatine. And it's because I take creatine monohydrate supplements. So I have more creatine than a body should regularly produce, and that's accurate because I take creatine supplements. Right. Which was pretty fun to see too. But other than that, I don't take any drugs, and I want to keep it that way, especially if I'm healthy.
Mine would probably be high in Cheez-Its and Goldfish.
You should do a blood test.
I actually knocked down the chips. I don't have any chips at home anymore. I haven't eaten.
No, that's good.
I eat maybe like one bag every other day, like a little tiny bag.
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah, so.
I think that what she'll probably do is she'll probably try to put me on statins. And I'll be like, fuck off. And then, so actually I looked into it because I was like, man, I wonder if I'm eating poorly, like worse than I think, because saturated fats contribute to cholesterol production.
I've heard that is false as well.
I've heard that's true.
Okay. We'll figure it out.
Yeah, it's saturated fat, not total fats. There are healthy fats, but saturated fats in like
I heard the saturated fat thing was a myth based off of the food pyramid and other underlying incentives, because a lot of meats contain saturated fats, and we've been eating saturated fats forever, and our bodies actually digest that stuff really well, and there's actually a lot of health benefits. That's what I've heard as a recently, but
Well, it's not all saturated
Okay.
fats. It's an excess of saturated fats. So like a healthy amount of saturated fats is like 20 grams per day. Or I think it's 22 grams per day, and I'm eating, because I track all my food in macro factors, so I know exactly what I'm eating.
yeah.
I eat 21.6 grams
Okay.
every day. So I'm like just around the regular limit, or I'm just around the healthy limit. The regular limit, do you know what the average grams that an American consumes? Probably 50. It's over 70.
Wow.
Which is why saturated fats is an issue. It's not that saturated fats are bad, it's that anything in excess is bad. And
Got it.
everything you eat that's processed and is meant to last has a bunch of shit in it, like saturated fats, that can contribute to cholesterol. But what's even more interesting is I don't remember what podcast I was listening to, but less than 5% of your dietary influences your cholesterol production. So even if you eat a shit ton of saturated fats, it'll only change your cholesterol levels by like maybe 5%. So if you like eat way cleaner, it might actually not make a huge difference. A lot of it is exercise, insulin dependence, and your genetic factors. So
yeah, I'll send you some stuff too. That's very interesting though. So it's interesting about the saturated fats too, because I was taught as a kid. I remember this vividly in my like 6th grade health class. They were like, avoid saturated fats at all costs. Saturated fats are the worst. Blah 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 blah. Like it really got drilled into us. And I think actually this might not still be the case, but in my hometown Brookline, there was no McDonald's. And the reason there was no McDonald's is because McDonald's uses saturated fats in their French fries and stuff like that.
Right.
And so Brookline had a law that no restaurant or food distributor could have like ready to serve saturated fats in like, a restaurant or delivery style to go. Like it was a law, like no saturated fats at all, which is, I think I should double check this stuff. I mean, I'm going to write it down because I'm curious, but yes.
Well, in my diet, like maybe 18 of the 21 grams of saturated fats that I eat come from the meat that I eat. And then the rest of it is from like, the Cheez-Its.
That's interesting too.
So I don't think they're all bad, but I think in excess it's bad. But I think what I remember hearing is that in your arteries, there's like the inner layer and then the outer layer, and in between it is where the crap builds up that shrinks the internal diameter. And an excess of saturated fats with a higher cholesterol level builds up the fats in that in-between area. I can't really remember, but the TLDR is all of the shit that I'm eating is way below the average and in the healthy range. So what I'm eating is fine, and my exercise isn't where I want to be, but it's fine. My blood pressure is fine and my resting heart rate is fine, but I'm just producing like over twice the amount.
And your blood pressure is fine? Like resting?
My blood pressure is perfect.
That's interesting. I wonder if you have a high count of like low density cholesterol that's not really contributing to blood pressure overall.
Well, I don't know,
because the lower density cholesterol, from what I remember, you won't see an increase in blood pressure even with a higher LDL. I think is the low density one, whichever one's the low density one. You won't see an increase in blood pressure because it's very fine particulate, and so when it's going through your arteries and stuff like that, it doesn't actually put pressure outwards as much as like HDL or the high density one. I'm assuming HDL is a high density one from memory, but
yeah. Well, I think I have a lot of HDL and not a lot of LDL. Okay, I remember. But also, cholesterol production is linked to your hormones. So a lot of testosterone yields a lot of cholesterol and not so much the opposite, which is why heart disease is bigger in men than in women. So with whatever this lady tries to do, I'm going to probably ask for like a hormone panel or a genetic test to see, because no one in my family,
BRCA style one.
Yeah. I don't know of anybody in my family who has had it. But I'd like to see. They're stupid expensive though, so I'll see if insurance can cover it. But
well, you can do the genetic test if you have an ancestry.com done already. You can use the data from ancestry.com in order to actually find manually, like within your data string, to find which one. And there's YouTube videos online of like how to look for it.
Yeah.
And there's also other kits out there that are only like $100 or $200 I think the Gary Breckel one's just more expensive because I think his is probably a little bit more of a deep dive, and also his expertise is valuable to some extent. I would take it, at least in my opinion.
Yeah.
But
I think I disagree with a lot of Gary Brecka's stuff, but like genetic tests don't lie. Like that's just it.
yeah,
Right. But in any case, I'm going to start with genetic testing or hormone panels to see before anything else. But the key takeaway I think is it's an opportunity to exercise like critical thought and like don't just be a sheep to
yeah,
slaughter. Don't just do pills because
No.
it's easier to do pills. So yeah, that's my life update.
No, very cool.
I'm dying.
No, that was a good update. Sorry, I interrupted that a bunch, but
You good?
I'm curious. I'll send you some stuff when I
Yeah.
once we're done with the podcast.
You didn't interrupt. You contributed.
That's right. That's right. So we're gonna dive into the main part of the podcast now. It's as summarized in the intro, you kind of know what's coming to you. I sent you the questions, so I'm gonna start off with where you were as the first part 1 of 4, actually. So my first question is what defining moment pushed you to leap into entrepreneurship, and when was it?
It was you. It was the car ride back from Orlando Karting Center. We were talking about what you wanted to do after college because I had my job with Northrop like lined up and ready to go. And Elizabeth didn't, and you didn't either.
Yeah.
And I was like, "What do you want to do?" And you're like, "I think I'm gonna day trade." And I was like, "What? Like, you can do that now. What are you talking about?" And you're like, "Yeah, well, I'm just gonna like keep working at Autobahn." And I was like, "You're gonna keep working like for minimum wage in the sweaty ass shop all day and then like day trade at night. The whole point of day trading is during the day. Like you're not gonna be able to do that." And you're like, "Yeah, well, I'm gonna wake up at 4:30 in the morning and I'm gonna do all this shit and then I'm gonna go to work and then I'll come back and I'll trade again." And I was like, "Dude, you're gonna be way too tired. Like you're too tired right now. Plus, like, you're getting an engineering degree. Don't you want to use it?"
Yeah.
And you were like, "Well, I'm doing engineering because I like it, not because I want to like make money from it or make a career out of it." And I was like, "But why don't you just get an AC job, like in air conditioning and then do the day trading?" And you were like, "God, it's a fair point." And I was like, "But why the day trading at all? Because engineering is why we're going to school." Like I grew up wanting to be an engineer and then I became one. So I was like really excited to do engineering. And you're like, "They just don't make enough money. It's not what I want to do." And I was like, I mean, you can make like hundreds of thousands of dollars a year. And you were like, "Yeah, but with day trading, you could make millions a year." And I hadn't actually considered, like, you hear about millionaires or billionaires, but I guess I had only up to that point considered like people who win the lottery or inherit it. And I was like, oh, like those people make like, whatever, 25, $50 million a year because their companies they just do it.
Yeah.
But I didn't consider the lower level. Like there are people who make $800,000 a year and $3 million a year. And that's not the crazy, like I own Nike money, but it's the like, oh shit, that's actually attainable. Like I could build a business or learn a skill to pay that type of money.
Yeah, very cool. That was a fun conversation. It was a good time too because Elizabeth had such a different perspective than I think either of us did.
She hated
In
it.
some,
Yeah, she-
yeah, no, she really hated it, which was kind of entertaining. But yeah, that was fun. I feel like that was the pivotal moment for our business ventures too. Was that car ride back?
Yeah.
It's like it's kind of a moment of like, well, what about more? You know what I mean? That's kind of how it felt to me.
It kind of sucked because I hadn't graduated at that point. I was really excited to graduate. And so like whatever, a month or two before graduation,
Pulled all the wind out of your sails.
I was like, well, hang on, am I doing the right thing or did I just waste 4 years? I don't know. And then I showed up to work my first day and I was like, this sucks. And I'm not excited to do it anymore.
Yeah, so we had that conversation together. We kept going through college and stuff like that, and kind of slowly meandered into the business realms. I would say, spring to summer of 23.
Mhm.
And what business skills or life skills or knowledge did you underestimate in that early spring 2023 time, and how did that impact your early decisions? So essentially, like, what did you underestimate that you thought like, oh, I won't need that, or like, oh, I won't really need to dive into that? Like, what did you underestimate initially that, coming forth, you realize, oh shit, I actually do need to learn that.
I think I super underestimated how much money it costs to live because until then I had just lived with my parents and they didn't pay for like my gas or anything in high school, but like I didn't have to pay rent. And eventually it got to the point where I would make my own food, but I would just put the food that I wanted on the grocery list and then I would do the meal prep. So they were still paying for my food. And so when I graduated college and was starting to look at places to move out, I was like, hey man, like rent costs a whole lot, and so does food, and so does gas and insurance and all this other shit. So I had taken a loan from my parents. It was a $3,000 loan for racing equipment in like February.
Mhm.
And I was like, dude, $3,000, that's like one paycheck from Northrop Grumman. Cause I started at $77,000 a year.
Yeah.
I was like, that's like one paycheck. It'll be fine. I'll pay it off in 2 weeks. And then I got my first paycheck and it was like $2,100. And I was like, where's my extra 900? The answer is taxes.
Yeah.
So I didn't actually make the money I was thinking. And then of that money, I had to pay shit with it. So
Yeah.
at the end of each like paycheck, I had like a couple $100 extra. And like, I don't want to pay my parents that. So I really underestimated like how much money it takes to live, because if you want to start a business, usually it means a period of time where you're not making any money, and you need to still pay for all your shit in that period. So it's you have to save up money, or like I wanted to buy a house to start doing like turnkey housing. Like I would rent a house out to a tenant.
Yeah.
But the down payment for that is like, 20%, or you have to pay private insurance or what's it called?
It's like 4 paychecks.
Yeah. I like four paychecks, or a year and a half of saving.
Right.
And I was like, man, I don't want to do that either. So I think I really underestimated just how much it takes to live.
Yeah.
But that's more of a tangible thing. I think what I underestimated with the first couple business ventures that we did was the need for employees, because my first introduction into business was with the day trading thing, where it's like, oh, you could just do it all from your laptop on your own. But I found through those first couple online ventures we did, because we did drop shipping and I looked in Amazon affiliate marketing and then one other thing that I can't remember.
Probably e-commerce in general.
Yeah, maybe it was a little bit of the Forex stuff. But I was like, when I was looking at it, I was like, man, I want like a team of people to do this with and like, like work for and with me.
Mhm.
And all that stuff is like kind of solo or all like digital and online. And I underestimated at the time my level of satisfaction with that, because I quickly found out like I'm a social person, right? I grew up with a team sport, so I want to work with people like on things.
Yeah.
So those are the two things I underestimated.
Were there any like mental roadblocks that you encountered that you figured you'd power through, but you realized it would take a lot more, like maybe in terms of perseverance or dedication or uh, you know, critical thinking, maybe stuff like that? Was there anything like in that realm that you thought like, oh, I can blow through that, but then you actually hit it and you're like, oh shit, this is going to take a lot or a little bit more than I expected?
I think the biggest mental roadblock that I had wasn't actually the standard term for a roadblock, but it was more so my methodology of thinking was flawed, in that when I would learn something new, like, oh, I can make whatever $800,000 from day trading. Day trading is the answer. That is what I'm going to do. That's the solution to all my problems. And then I learned about real estate and I was like, fuck day trading. Real estate is the answer to all my problems. I'm going to do that. And then I learned about Rich Dad, Poor Dad with Robert Kiyosaki, where he was like, you shouldn't just like invest in real estate, but like you should invest in large amounts of real estate and leverage debt and all that. And then I was like, oh my God, throw it all out the window.
That is the answer.
That is the answer. And then after that, I found Hormozy, where he was like, none of that shit is the answer. The answer is different for everybody, and the answer for everyone changes over time. And I think that when I started finding the Hormozy content, I started to recognize that, like, look, whatever trend you're on right now is not like the end all be all. Like, it's going to change.
Yeah.
So with whatever you're doing, like, be open to new ideas. And I think that in the early stages, I was so hooked, and there's a benefit to that. There's a benefit to being hooked and locked into one thing, because then you're going to do that until it works,
Right.
which is good. But it also can hinder your ability to see the whole picture for what it is and find its shortcomings and find the weak areas, if you're just excited about it, right?
So maybe like a lack of being able to like step back and look at things from a third person point of view rather than like a first person point of view.
Yeah. Like when people would point out flaws, for every 9 flaws that someone, or for every 10 flaws that someone would point out, maybe there's one like legitimate one. But being able to discern the difference between my mom saying that's not going to work, which has nothing behind it, versus a real criticism of like, well, how are you going to pay your bills when you quit your job to do this? you know, one of those is like, you just don't have faith in me and nothing to back it up. And the other one is like, okay, well, shit, how am I going to pay these bills? Right.
Yeah.
And I didn't like not having an answer to that. So I would kind of just like either ignore it or fill in the gaps with like, well, it's going to work. So I'm not worried. Um, and I think that was a big blocker for me.
Huh. Yeah. I see that too. I think I've had maybe similar,
Mhm.
but I also wanted to ask you out of, when you were starting out, going through some of these roadblocks or figuring out, that life was actually way more expensive than you thought it was. Were there any failures along the way? Um, and what lessons did you learn from those failures? Do you feel like, like, oh shit, like I screwed up. I got to learn something here. Like, were there any times like that along the way where you were almost like maybe glad you had the failure because it gave you the opportunity to learn about it?
I think there are maybe small failures, but honestly, I don't think I've taken big enough risks yet to warrant a large failure. I think it's it's like death by 1,000 pinpricks type of thing. So it's like, oh, well, maybe I'm spending more on groceries than I should. So I'm losing out on like an extra $100 a month that I could be saving.
Yeah.
Or, I'm living with, Grace, but she doesn't have the money to pay for rent right now because she has student loans and is trying to make real estate work and is working at the bar like 2 days a week. So I'm covering most of the expenses.
Yeah.
Um, but I can kind of choose to look at those as well. I want to spend money on groceries because my health is important to me, and I'd rather spend more money on higher quality foods. And also, well, if I didn't live with Grace, then I would be living alone anyways and having to pay these costs regardless.
Right.
But by living with Grace, I'm investing in that relationship, which will hopefully pay off in the long run when she gets good at real estate and then can teach me how to do it.
Right.
So I think that there's two sides to every coin, but I haven't had like a major fuck up yet. I haven't like lost a ton of money or like burned bridges down or gotten in trouble with the government or anything. I don't think there's been like major failures yet.
Yeah. Yeah. Me neither, luckily.
Yeah.
Is there anything you'd go back to your younger self and try to inform them about before going on this business venture in regards to failures, or we do kind of let them go through that same process because you feel as though those failures were valuable to your development into who you are today?
I think that for most people, failure is important. If you've never failed before, then failure is important. But if you have and you know what it tastes like and you can go learn lessons from other people without having to experience those mistakes, that's great. So, like, I don't need to get bit by a venomous snake to know that that snake is venomous, right? It would be stupid to say I need to be bit by that venomous snake to know for sure, because then you're putting your life in danger to know something that you could have learned otherwise because that monkey died from that
Right.
snake.
I feel like that's what like the early settlers of the Americas, the early European settlers of Americas. There were those people here before, but I feel like I had this when as a kid. I was like, how did they figure out that like those berries on that tree are poisonous and those berries are good?
Yeah.
And I just like had this vision of like, all right, Joe and Bob, Joe, you're gonna eat that berry, Bob, you're gonna eat that berry, and then they just watch.
Yeah. Yeah.
Kind of like that. You know what I mean? Not everyone has my point being is not everyone has to eat all those berries. You can learn from other people, okay, he got sick eating those berries, so don't eat those. Everyone don't eat those, right?
Yeah.
Not every person has to try the berry.
Yeah, exactly. Or smoking cigarettes for a modern example. It's like
Right.
tons
But
of
at the
people.
same time, it's important to know I think it's important to know the why aspect of the failure. Like, don't eat that berry because it will make you sick.
Right.
Like, if you just tell someone like, don't eat that berry,
Mhm.
right? Then there's kind of like a well, why, right? So I think the part of the point you raised as well was that it's important to understand what failure can lead to and what it can look like for you to appreciate the teachings from someone else's failure.
Right.
Because if you have no clue what failure is like and people are like, oh, well, don't do that because you'll fail, but you don't even have a concrete emotional or physical understanding of what failing is like,
Right.
then it's hard for you to grasp what the pain is really associated with, you failing in that sense. Does that make sense?
It does.
Okay.
Yeah. And I think that a lot of people hate old money, young people. So like,
Yeah.
you know, if your dad's a billionaire and so you drive Lamborghinis because your dad's a billionaire, people hate those people. And I think one of the reasons they do is because they've actually never experienced failure, or like very small, minute scale failure where it doesn't have large implications, right?
Yeah.
Because most people who don't have that safety net of a ton of money, they face major failure every day. Every day you get on the road and go, you know, 80 miles an hour this far apart from another car going 80 miles an hour the opposite direction. I mean, if you get in a major accident like that and owe medical bills for yourself and the person you hit and car payments for a new car and all that shit, like that's a major, major life implication that rich people who haven't earned it, like they just inherited it, they don't understand the gravity of that situation. They can hit you head on, but they're in a Range Rover, so they'll be fine, and they can just pay to make everything go away.
Right. Right.
And so they don't. I feel like there's a lot of resentment for those people because they don't understand what failure looks like,
Yeah.
and everyone else is kind of on the verge of it every day.
You can hit someone in a BMW 3 Series and you'll be fine. It's- The other person may not be.
Well, they turn down in front of you, but yeah,
Yeah. Fair enough.
yeah, you could turn out into traffic with no regard for anyone's head. That's safe,
Fair enough.
and maybe yeah, who knows? But
Yeah.
yeah, I think generally speaking, I think failure is a good thing in moderation, just to learn. Yeah, I think that it's better to know why you failed than to know that you succeeded, right?
Mm.
Um, Failure hurts, but at the end of the day, it's learning lessons. So Alex Ramose's whole thing is like fail fast because it means that you're learning quickly and you'll be doing it better faster.
Yeah.
But the fastest way to learn is to just learn from other people's fuck ups. Because like,
Yeah.
you know,
That's why I love the Hermosi podcast so much.
right,
And any other podcast. I mean, Joe Rogan's great too, and Lex Friedman and PBD and all these podcasts. It's like you can really open up your eyes to what other people did and what what made them fail, what made them successful, and stuff like that. And like if you're attentive and you take a couple notes or just listen attentively, like you can really gain a lot.
yeah.
You know.
Well, what was heard? I think Kiyosaki had this saying about people who just put their money in a 401k that is invested in the S&P 500 for retirement. He called it failing long.
Oh
Like,
yeah.
it's like fail long. So like I could not do business and I could not quit my job and any of that. And I can just put my money in a 401k and then wait until I'm 70 to retire and then cash out my money and learn the valuable lesson that maybe the money isn't there anymore. But I don't want to spend 50 years learning that lesson when I can see other people retiring today who are learning that lesson currently, and it sucks.
Yeah, yeah. That's kind of interesting because I feel like maybe earlier you talked about the drive back from OKC in the car as your kind of like transitional moment from like a traditional 9 to 5 perspective to a more business perspective.
Right.
And it's interesting because I feel like that simultaneously is also transition from like failure long to learning to fail short and succeed long.
Right.
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 Which is kind of a interesting, like those two kind of go together. They're simultaneous.
Yeah.
You know?
I think a lot of people are afraid of failure. And I don't think that I ever had that because I was so bad at shit growing up. Like I could not fail growing up because I wasn't naturally talented at many things. So when I did fail, it didn't bother me. I just learned from it to try to get better. And unfortunately, I think that a lot of people who are naturally talented in something really suffer from failure because they aren't used to it and they don't know how to learn from it. And I think a lot of people see failure as just a like hallmark bad thing, not a opportunity to learn.
Yeah, yeah. When you were younger and before we started off in business, do you feel as though you were like a naturally very competitive person? Like, were you a competitive person, A, but maybe B, were you also like a sore loser, or were you a good loser? Like, kind of how did that like competitive mindset play in? And maybe we'll dive into a little bit how that's morphed.
I was a super huge pussy when I was a kid.
Gotcha.
I was a bitch. My dad,
In what sense though? Was it like, you would be really upset when you lost something, or would you just like not even want to try in the first place? Like what about that?
I would be happy to play,
Mm,
but if someone else won, then I didn't really care. And if other kids laughed, then like kind of so be it, you know?
mm,
So it's like I had no competitive drive and I didn't really care a lot. So like,
yeah.
I think that several of my friends growing up were actually not my friends. They were kind of mean to me. But I didn't recognize that that wasn't cool because at the time I was just like, oh, well, that's what friends do. They rag on each other. So when I make, Chase's mom jokes, I always follow it up with Chase to make sure like, hey man, this is like out of love. Right.
Yeah, yeah.
Because growing up, I didn't have that. People would just make jokes and then like leave it. And I would be like, all right, this is what friendship is. But I wouldn't make those jokes back to them because like I don't want to insult you.
Yeah.
But I was super like non-competitive and like I would just roll over until I found rowing, which is where I got really competitive really quickly.
Do you feel like initially you were non-competitive because you felt as though like the things you were involved in with what were like too far out of your grasp versus the other people around you saw accelerating? Do you feel like it was like, oh, like it just clicks for them, it doesn't click for me, whatever, I don't care. And then when you got into rowing, it was more so like, oh, this clicks for me, and now I care because I see it clicking for other people too, but I really want to level my game. Was it
Yeah,
kind of like that?
I think it's
Yeah.
like that. Yeah, I wasn't naturally talented at soccer or basketball, and I mean, I hold the perspective that with enough training you can become good in anything, but I felt like I didn't really care. Like I didn't care about getting the ball into the net. It didn't matter to me in any sport.
Yeah.
Um, and I wasn't a fast runner, so like cross country and track and field never was alluring to me just because I didn't like to run. But I liked racing games and I liked cars. So when I found rowing, which is like probably apart from cycling, like the closest thing you can get to like motorsport racing in athletics, I was like, oh, like this. Not only do I love being on the water and I love the equipment, I love that it's all carbon fiber. This fucking 60-foot long thing is only 200 pounds and like it's all fast and racing and shit. And everyone here is polite because a lot of kids I played like soccer and basketball with growing up, they're kind of assholes. But rowing is a gentleman's sport. So I got along with everybody on the team really well. And the team was really tight knit, unlike soccer and basketball. Um, so I really clicked with everything about it, and I just enjoyed my time there more than I did for soccer and basketball. And then as a result of that, I think I actually tried a little bit harder and found that I was actually decent at it. And that's when I really locked in and got much better at it and then really competitive.
Very cool. Very cool. Is there a certain challenge that comes to mind, like your biggest challenge before you started getting into business that you had to overcome, and how did you do it? How did you
Challenge.
like maybe when you were younger, is there a certain like challenge or obstacle that comes to mind that you can look back on and be like, oh man, that was tough, but I learned X, Y, and Z from it.
Yeah, I mean, there are a bunch of things like that. Um, my my time in high school, I've got like four. Um, my time in high school with rowing, you go to district
Hmm.
championships, which is like Brevard County and Orange County, and then you go to states, and then you go to regionals, which is like 5 or 6 states, and then you go to nationals. And in my freshman year, so it doesn't matter. Um, so in my freshman year of high school, I had more experience than everyone else in my boat, because I had done the middle school training camps, to kind of like level up, and we went to states and we didn't do well. We got like fifth. But then one of the kids in the second fastest boat on the team, I was a freshman. It's like usually if a freshman leaves the freshman boat and goes into like a varsity boat, you go into like the third or fourth fastest boat. But one of the kids in the second fastest boat left the state. He moved. And so they needed someone to sub in because they did well at states and they were going to regionals. And so the coach didn't pick someone from the 3V or the 4V. He picked me from the freshman eight and moved me up in there. So I had the opportunity to like really fuck it up with the cool guys on the team
Mm.
or do something special. Because that boat, if I recall correctly, came close to a medal the year before, but didn't quite get it. And so I got in the boat and I raced and we got a medal. So now I didn't race in that boat at states, so I did not get the states medal, but I do have a regionals medal. So I'm now like the most decorated freshman on the team going into my sophomore year. So I think I'm hot shit. So I row in the 2V for my sophomore year. And then I think I'm really hot shit. So I stopped trying. And then in my junior year, I got knocked out of the 3V. And then by the senior year, I'm back up in the 2V again. But throughout my entire career, I had that regionals medal around my neck, but I had never gotten a states medal. And it bothered me, even though it's a smaller race, so it's more impressive to have the regionals medal.
Mm.
It bothered me that I didn't have a states medal. And I really wanted one. And in my senior year, I decided at the beginning of the year, I was like, this is my last chance to get it. So I'm going to really lock in and I'm going to give 100% every stroke every day. I'm going to build the perfect lineup, the perfect boat. And I'm going to work with the coach as a team captain to build practices that are going to win us races. And we missed out on a medal by the smallest margin of any rowing race that I've ever seen. It was less than a tenth of a second. It was 0.004 of a second. So there's a little rubber ball that's like maybe this big, it's the size of a bouncy ball on the very front of the boat. And people will say in rowing, like there's 8 guys giving everything they have to push this little rubber ball across the finish line before everyone else. And the photo finish came down to, it was the size of one of the bow balls. So like we were 2 inches away from winning. And actually, as we crossed the finish line, we were at the very beginning of a stroke, and the other boat that beat us was at the very end of a stroke. So as soon as we crossed the finish line, we were ahead of them because we were catching all throughout the second half of the race.
Or just paced just off from
Yep.
where you could have been
Yep.
on the finish.
Just off. And
Wow.
so I was like, man, that fucking hurts. But we got 4th, which means we qualify for regionals. So now we can go to regionals. And so I was so pissed off. I was like 0.004 of a second. Every day we would start practice, and I go 4 fucking thousandths of a second. And so we took that boat to regionals and we got 1st.
Cool.
Which is fucking fantastic.
That's awesome.
So that was a success story of a challenge. And then funny enough, I had a similar thing happen in my junior year of college where I missed out on a medal by 0.04 of a second. So 10 times the difference, but still in a second.
So small.
And that photo finish is fucking rough too. So like those are tough to look at, but it really shows you that like people will train for, no kidding, like 10 months, 5 hours a day, 7 days a week, and it comes down to less than a tenth of a second.
That's what I love about competition sports, though. I mean, racing is the same thing. Like, there were races I was in, and the top 10 would be within the same 2/10.
Yep.
And it's like, holy shit. Like, there were times like I was, ahead of people by, a few thousandths on a minute-long lap.
Yeah.
And it's like, it is close out there. But that's what makes it fun. That's what makes it interesting. And what's cool about like as you get better, the differences between like you and the best people become smaller, but it becomes exponentially harder for you to get the last little gap that you need.
Yeah.
Like, it's easy to go from, 0 to 10, but it's harder to go from 10 to 20 and then 20 to 30 and 30 to 40 and etc. It becomes much harder as you, go up in your like percentage ability. Stuff like that.
Actually, there's a fucking awesome quote related to that I'm going to pull up. But so that's probably the biggest like competitive challenge that I've faced. But my biggest mindset challenge, do they not have a search feature in Google Docs online? Find and replace. Here we go. Here we go.
We'll find it.
You can beat 50% of your competition by consistently showing up and working hard. You can beat the next 40% by doing things with urgency and detail. The last 10% is simply a dogfight.
Yeah.
So it's just who wants it more. I'm sure I've read that times on the podcast, but
yeah, it's a good one though.
I think the biggest developmental challenge that I had was my last big breakup. I was putting a lot of emphasis on my partner in my relationship, and my life kind of revolved around the people that I was dating and like wanted to get married to.
Yeah.
I was in a polyamorous relationship with multiple girls, and I was putting a lot of pressure on myself to perform in that relationship to make everybody happy, because I was happy and I wanted to make sure that it stayed that way. But I didn't realize that I was so selfless in my effort to make everyone happy that I would consistently put things that I was interested in aside. But it kind of worked out anyways, because, for example, if I want to go racing with my friends, or I can go, like cook dinner for these girls before they get home.
Yeah.
I would prefer to cook dinner. And that was to make them happy, which in turn made me happy, but it wasn't like what I would want to do if they weren't around. And the difficulty with that is that you're putting your sense of accomplishment and happiness on someone else. So if they're not happy, I'm not happy. And that's not the way that I want to live. I want to be the one to determine if I'm happy or not. So when we broke up, I was really, really sad, and it was really, really challenging for me to get through that. But ultimately, I'm glad it happened because it taught me to not depend on other people.
Yeah, very, very true. That's a good and important lesson to learn. Definitely agree with that. My last question for this section is a quick question. On a scale of 1 to 10, before you got into business, how would you rate yourself as an overall person? as like a culmination of like who you are. I know that's tough. I know it's tough and it's very superficial, but I kind of have like a plan with it.
I understand.
And so I would just like 1 to 10, like looking back today on who you were then, how would you see yourself on a scale of 1 to 20 as like an overall developed young man or man in general?
I would say
However you want to answer it.
I would say in the long term, like ultimately where I want to be when I die as a wise man, I was probably maybe like a 5 out of 5, maybe.
So that would be a 10 out of 10.
I'm sorry, a 5 out of 10.
Okay.
All right. Sorry. No. I'd say on the long term, on the long run, maybe 5 out of 10. I had a lot of the fundamentals down. I think I had good values and good morals. I just wasn't putting them into the perspective of myself, which is what I ultimately should have been doing.
How do you think you would have rated yourself on a personal level back then?
I think at that point in time, I probably would have rated myself a 10 out of 10, which is why I rate myself as a 5 out of 10 today. A little bit of ego there and a little bit of short-sightedness, which is fine for young men.
Yeah.
I think that's acceptable.
It's developmental.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
And I think that as far as I mean, I was what 21 or 22. As far as 21 and 22-year-olds go, I would put myself in the top 10% of all 21 and 22-year-olds in terms of maturity.
Probably true.
But
Very true.
comparing yourself to the overall average, comparing yourself to where you want to go are very different things. So yeah, I would say 5 out of 10.
Cool. Very nice. Thank you. So our second section is about where you are today, kind of building off of where you were, now going into where you are. My first question is how did you get to the point you're at today? And what 3 pieces of advice would you give to someone trying to get to that place from a mental or physical perspective?
So this is the difference from this is the time, the delta.
Yeah, like the last year and a half.
So from when you and I talked in the car about business and like that awakening to now.
Yeah, pretty much. Like, how did you get from that point to where you are today? And what 3 pieces of advice would you give to someone trying to go down a similar path, that maybe is in the shoes of someone in that car, a year and a half ago or whatever?
I think that the first piece of advice. Well, wait, what was the first half of the question? How did I get here?
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, I drove here today. Okay.
Fair enough.
How did I get here? Well,
Maybe we could start with like how maybe some main points of how you think you've developed into who you are today.
Good.
And then how did you get to those developed points?
Yeah.
And then what pieces of advice would you give to someone also trying to develop in a similar manner?
I think that I'm much more level-headed today than I was a year ago. I actually remember we would get real riled up and like super excited at the bar about like, man, all these fucking people are hanging out here. Like, it's just like relaxing, but we're here working. We're grinding. Like, we're better than them. Like, we're motherfuckers. Like, we're going to get it. We're going to make it. And that is very like 20-year-old energy. I understand that. That's like finance bro, like alpha guy.
Mm-hmm.
And that's not who I want to be when I'm 80. So why am I that way now?
Right.
I had that realization, especially with the Hormozy stuff, because when you're younger, the successful guys usually act like that. And so you think, well, okay, to be like them, to be successful, I also should act like that. And I should like feed into the ego, like ego lifters like Sam Sulek lift a lot of weight and I want to lift a lot of weight. So like, I'm going to hit the ego too.
Yeah.
And I think that the largest change that I've made from then to now is I found Alex Hormozy, who is, I look up to Alex Hormozy way more than any other person of equal success who has that attitude. And he's really shown me, hey, you don't have to feed the ego beast to get there. Jordan Peterson, you should be a monster and you should control it.
Yeah.
Right? It's kind of like that. I built the monster really well through college and just out of college. But I wasn't controlling it at all. And I think since then, I've learned to do that. So I think the biggest piece of advice I would give to people who want to follow the same path is number 1, don't get distracted with shit. Like, don't go partying with friends. Don't get your girlfriend pregnant. Basically, we have this thing in rowing when it's within like 2 weeks of a race, everyone goes dry. So we stop drinking alcohol. And we call it low risk, no risk, which is essentially Don't play basketball. Don't play flag football. Don't fucking like race people on your bikes. Like, don't do dumb shit because low risk is no risk. Like,
And
you're gonna be okay if you just don't act a fool. And we would do that to ensure that no one was injured for the rowing races. And I think that there's a similar policy with business, which is it's really easy, especially as you start making money, to get wrapped up in fancy watches and cool cars and going out with your friends. And it's if those are the things that you enjoy, I understand that. But you just have to put a limit on yourself. So a great example, a working example is I watch every competitive Formula One session that happens. So on race weekends, I'll spend like, no kidding, like 15 hours a weekend watching Formula One. And I multitask. I do it while I do other work and stuff like that. But generally speaking, if I'm ingesting the content, I count it. And I don't make any money doing that. Like when I sit down, last night was the race in Las Vegas. It was from 1 a.m. to 3 a.m. and I watched it live. Max Verstappen won his fourth world title.
wow, so cool.
Actually, interestingly, diverging here, only 3 drivers have ever won their first 4 titles back to back to back to back.
Oh,
And that's Alain Prost,
Mm.
Sebastian Vettel, and Max Verstappen.
cool.
Max Verstappen has won more races in those 4 world titles than any of them. Granted, there are more races, but even by percentage, it's still more races. And he's done it in the shortest amount of time by 1 day. Because he won the race on a Saturday. Because the Las Vegas Grand Prix is on a Saturday.
Wow.
They can party balls Saturday night.
Oh, cool.
So that's like by design. So like they finished the race at Saturday, or maybe it's like Sunday at like 1 a.m. or something like that. Or maybe it's Saturday at midnight. But technically, he beat Sebastian Vettel's record of 4 world championships by 1 day, which is fucking crazy. But I don't make any money on it. So I found a way through Polymarket when you bet on the election to bet on Formula One. And I was like, oh, this is super cool. We can trade it like stock. So it's not binary betting. So it's like if on lap 30, it doesn't look like my guy's going to win and his stock is dropping a little bit, I can quick sell it and like, hedge my losses or stem the flow,
Mhm.
So I told myself, I was like, okay, I'm going to put $20 into this. And that's all I have for the rest of the season. So maybe at the beginning of next season, I'll put in like $100 to last the whole season, or maybe like $5 a race or something like that.
Yeah.
But if I lose my money, that's it. I'm done. I'm not putting any more in. And so I bet a little bit on Lando Norris and a little bit on Charles Leclerc last night. And I watched it live, so I could have sold it in the middle of the race, but I was like, I don't want to get distracted. Neither of them won, so I lost that money. Done. Now, of the money, of the $20 I put in, I think I bet like 12 on this race. So I still have 8 left over. Well, I put 4 of that into Ferrari for the World Constructors Championship, and Ferrari beat McLaren in that race. So they are now within 30 points of McLaren, and there's still 2 races left, and one of them is a sprint race, so they could easily win it. So, I lost the $12 on this race bet, but I still have 8 to play with, and that 8 is probably now 10 because Ferrari did well. I haven't checked. But essentially what I did was I said, how much, if I went to go get dinner right now, how much money would I be willing to spend on it? And I was like, not much. I'm not feeling great with money right now. I'd probably buy a McDonald's and a McFlurry. So $20. And that's
Yeah.
how much I put into it. And I'm holding myself to that. I'm not putting any more in for the rest of the season. So it's like something fun to play with, but in moderation. Right.
Yeah.
So yeah, have fun, but like put limits on it and follow your limits.
Yeah. Yeah. Those are good, like, mental pieces of advice. Do you have anything like physically that you think you've changed? Like, for example, your workout structure or routine, or your dieting and eating habits, or your sleep schedule, or your scheduling, like something more like tangible that you've done to kind of get from the point that you were at to where you are today?
Yeah. It's interesting for me because I rode for so long.
Mm.
So right around the time that we started doing business is right around the time that I stopped rowing. And in my time rowing, it's so structured, you don't even give yourself an option. So there's not an option to work out. It's like I wake up at 5 and then I go work out and then I'm back at it again at 8. So when you retire, you have the option and it's so easy to not go.
Yeah.
So I got in the routine when I was living at my parents' house, like 30 minutes away from work. I'd bring workout clothes with me because I know that if I drive from my parents' house 30 minutes to work and then 30 minutes back to my parents' house, there's no fucking way I'm driving another 30 minutes back to the gym.
Yep.
So I bring the workout clothes with me. I live much closer to work now, but I still bring the workout clothes with me. Um, I'm also tracking it. So there's an Alex Hormozy quote. An easy way to spot talent is to see what the quality and quantity of the metrics that they track are. So if you only care if you track it, right? So like if you build a budget, then you care about how much money you're saving. Makes sense, right? If you have a stock portfolio and you check your stocks, if you're day trading, you care about your portfolio, right?
Yeah.
So I took that and I started tracking the number of days that I work out and the foods that I eat to see my calories in, calories out. Because I don't have the regulator of like with rowing, you can tell by how fast you are, how healthy and fit you are. Like it's a number because you give 100% for every piece, and you can kind of gauge how you're doing. But when you're not competing, I don't have that metric. It's just like, do I feel like shit or do I look fat? And that's weird. I've never had that before. Um, but I would say that the biggest one that I have accepted lately is sleep. I'm trying to I've done honestly really shit about it in the last week.
I've been really good about it this week.
Yeah, sure, it's awesome. Well, last week,
7 to 8 hours every night, and I'm actually waking up earlier too, and I'm going to bed earlier too.
yeah, that was me last week, and then this week, I let it slip just because I had other shit going on. Um, but I was okay with it because it's overall there's improvement. Um, I mean, the sleep, diet, and exercise are like the core three. Like, I don't function well without eating clean, exercising regularly, and sleeping well. Um, I can deal with little sleep for long periods of time, though I don't enjoy it because then it feels like the workouts I do are kind of moot, because I'm not building muscle because I'm not sleeping.
Yeah.
And then the food that I eat also doesn't matter because, I'm not building the muscle anyway. So why focus on what I'm eating if I'm not going to get in better shape because I'm not sleeping? Um,
Fair. So maybe like structuring incentive into your life has been a little bit of a change, at least from a life perspective. You've always had that structure from a workout perspective because of rowing and sports and stuff like that, but maybe from a sleep perspective or a diet perspective or budget or a time management and stuff like that, like kind of uh structuring in your schedule and your habits
mhm.
so that you kind of are faced with them front on when you have to go do something, like putting your gym clothes in your car so that like you're faced with that, like I gotta go to the gym, or like
Yeah,
having a budget and reminders set up on your Google Calendar or phone or whatever to kind of be like, okay, I gotta check this, like it's right in front of me.
right.
So it came maybe kind of like a subtle habit structure
Mhm.
internally has been maybe one of the changes for you.
Yeah, my food app, every time I put something in my mouth, I scan the barcode and type it into the app. And then every morning when I wake up and I take a shit and I weigh myself. And so every day that I weigh myself, I put that in the food app too. And while I'm on the toilet, I'll track, okay, how many calories did I burn yesterday? Because I burn calories while I sleep. So like I check in the morning. And then I type that into my did I work out or not tracker. So I calculate how many calories did I eat yesterday? How many did I burn? Am I in a deficit or a surplus? Um, so generally, if you care about something, track it. I've also found that putting it into my Google Calendar helps a lot. I've been trying to make a calendar a bigger part of my life, and it's been helping a lot,
Mm,
just to keep myself structured. So if every day I have work from 8 a.m. to 5 p.m., gym from 5 p.m. to 7 p.m., that's what I do.
got it.
The ones I exercise is not a struggle to me because I've always done it. Eating clean isn't a huge struggle for me. So long as I pay attention to it. If I don't pay attention to it, I'm naturally hungry, so I will eat a little bit more. Although it's not unhealthy, I'll eat just more than I really need. So in a surplus, the one I really struggle with is sleep because I know I can function on low sleep, and I feel like I'm missing out on life without sleep.
Yeah.
And to turn my brain off and make myself go to sleep sucks, and I hate it. But I've been doing it more recently.
Something that's really helped me is kind of like a loose schedule structure where it's like I have this, this, and this I want to do. I'm going to spend an hour on this, an hour on this, and an hour on this. And if on the first task I go an hour and a half, I go, okay, I told myself I'd spend an hour on this next task, but because I spent an hour and a half on the first one, I'm only going to spend a half hour on it.
Yeah.
And so, like, although that might upset me, it kind of forces me psychologically to reschedule in a better way the next day
Hmm.
so that I can get those 3 things done in an hour a piece each instead of like standing one and then kind of doing the others, shitty,
Right.
like stuff like that.
Yeah. It's
Uh,
time based, not subject based.
yeah, yeah.
Right.
Through kind of building these habit structures and stuff like that, do you feel as though you've experienced burnout less, maybe because you kind of implemented a little bit more structure, or do you feel like you never even experienced burnout in the first place?
Oh man, it's tough because it's kind of like saying, like, have you heard the phrase the worst thing to happen to someone is the worst thing that's happened to someone? Have you
Yeah,
heard that?
yeah.
So for the viewers, if the worst thing Sander has experienced is his parents dying in a fire and his girlfriend breaking up within the same day and he gets a cancer diagnosis, that's the worst thing that's ever happened to him. That's a tough day.
Yeah.
And if the worst thing that's ever happened to me is I stubbed my toe real bad, that's the worst thing that's ever happened to me. So it's all relative, right? So comparing the two, Sander has it worse than me. But in my world, I really my toe hurts, and that sucks. Um,
Right.
so when you say burnout, it's almost like the worst burnout I've experienced was the day in the spring of our senior year where we stayed up for like 3 days straight and like almost
That was bad.
crashed. Like we fucking crashed at Pauhana and like almost died on the way home. That's the worst burnout I've ever experienced. But after 2 days of sleeping nonstop, I felt great after that. I was ready to go again. So it's like I have come nowhere near that level of burnout in recent history. When we were doing the baking, I got close a couple times. Do you remember that one time we were baking and I was like, I don't feel good, and I had like a fucking 104 fever. And I was like, oh no! So we had to throw out a bunch of product, and like I had to go to sleep. That was my body shutting me down from not sleeping enough and etc. But I haven't experienced that level of burnout, and I think it's just because I'm there's not all the deadlines are internal, they're not external. So for senior year, it's like you have a graduation date and you have a competition date and you have to hit those deadlines. For everything I'm doing now, it's kind of like in my own time. And although I would like to get them done and I have vague deadlines, I'm not going to put my health at risk to hit those deadlines unless it's like a very critical opportunity. So it's like, you know, if if I have an opportunity to like close this huge deal and make a ton of money and make a bunch of connections, but it means sleeping 3 hours a night for a week, I will do that. But if it's like, hey, like, while you build your business for 6 months or a year or 2 years, you can only sleep 3 hours a night. I'm going to structure it differently because I don't want to put my health at risk in that way. So I would say I experienced less burnout with this structure. Um, but I'm not afraid of burnout if it's for a good opportunity, like going to competition.
Yeah. Yeah. I hear that. So I know that you like that kind of maybe I'm putting words in your mouth, but in some ways you've been at least riding on an internal deadline within yourself to get stuff done and stuff like that. Do you think that there is inherent value to an external deadline? For example, like when we were working at SAE, there were external deadlines coming at us, which really forced us to push ourselves outside of what we thought was possible in terms of like work ethic or production and stuff like that. And it kind of pushed us beyond the bounds that we knew at the time were possible. At least for me, that was the case. Like I didn't realize like I could stay up for 3 days straight and work on a Formula SAE car, associated documents and stuff like that. Do you think there's value to those external deadlines, or are you glad that you only have internal deadlines? Is there a mix that you think is ideal? Kind of where do you sit on that?
I like that external deadlines draw that out of me.
Mm.
Although what I learned ultimately,
It would be sad if they didn't, I think, because that would be kind of like a
I think a lot of people
weaker,
experience this.
I think that would be a lot weaker of a internal.
Right.
I don't want to say person, but that's the best word I can find.
Yeah.
There's a certain weakness associated with someone who cannot pull that out of them when they need to.
Right.
So I guess yes, definitely
Right.
thankful for that.
Yeah. Like Trish and Frank and Take It. I'm about to talk about.
Yeah, yeah,
But what I learned from SAE is that an external deadline motivates the shit out of me. But if the team's success is not only dependent on me, but also other members of the team, that's not great. I would have preferred an internal deadline with SAE because our team members sucked. They did not care about the external deadline. So it's tough. I would rather have an external deadline to motivate myself. But if I'm dependent on other people, having an external deadline kind of makes my asshole pucker because I don't know if I
Right.
can depend on other people. So I think ultimately the lesson to learn from there is if I'm going to be facing external deadlines, I need to have people who can meet those deadlines. So
Do you
being
think
very
that
selective.
experience though of like your asshole puckering when you have other people that you have to count on, was that a valuable experience that you think is going to help you in the future kind of coordinate that sort of thing and coordinate deadlines and figure out who to work with, who to not work with, stuff like that?
I think a lot of what it taught me was be super selective about people who you work with on important deadlines.
Mm.
And maybe before I would have thought like, oh, like whoever will do, like it doesn't matter, like, it's a scrappy team and we'll make it work. But I think what that taught me is you people are not often as motivated as I am to complete the tasks that I want to complete. And it's important, especially when taking on large endeavors, that you have people who care about it just as much as you do. And I think that if they don't, I learned this from Hormozy. Um, the best employees to hire are ones that you can align their goals with yours. So if you can align your goals with their goals, then you're going to make things happen. But if your goals are different, for example, our goals were to go to competition and race.
Yeah.
And our team's goals was to graduate.
Right.
So their goals was do the bare minimum to graduate, and ours was compete like at a high level at competition. So if I were to do that project again, I would try to find people that it wasn't. Maybe I would try to restructure it such that we're applying for scholar or for job opportunities. So like the better we do at competition, the better job opportunities we'll get. So yes, your goal is graduating, but right after you graduate, you have to get a job, and you don't have one lined up yet. Well, guess what? If you help me get to competition where I want to drive the fast car, I'll help you get job opportunities.
Yeah.
Aligning those goals. I think that's what I learned from that. And I think it's really, to dwell on this, I think it's really important that we have taken that away from it and not a bitterness of don't trust people, don't work with people, we work harder and we're better. None of that. Because I think that ultimately what makes a good leader is finding the perfect role for every employee that you have, not just picking good employees that can do everything. Because if you have to rely on somebody who's as good as you or can do everything even better than you, those are rare people. It's easier to find someone who specializes when in one category, but if you put that person on a task they have no ability to do, for example, at work right now, I'm doing that thing with the VP. That's one of my tasks. Another task, I'm doing fucking electromagnetic spectrum shit that I don't understand.
Yeah.
I'm a mechanical engineer and they have me doing all this electrical shit that I don't know anything about. So I am the wrong guy for that job, but they have me doing it anyways. And that's a mistake that management is making. And all, I mean, I'm going to try my hardest and I'm going to tap on the people who I can, but I don't think that my document is going to be good at the end of this compared to somebody who specializes in this field. And there is someone on our team who does specialize in that field, and they're not putting that guy on the job because he's doing something else.
Gotcha.
I
think from the external deadlines, as you said too, you're more likely to experience burnout from those external deadlines because it's something that you don't have as much control over. Right. If you're in a situation where you have to get that external deadline done, it's like a mandatory deadline, it has to be done. Are there certain tools or techniques that you use in order to fight the burnout to push yourself through that?
I think I just in the rare cases where I've had that, I've just wanted it bad enough that I didn't give me a choice.
Hmm.
So like whether it be, dude, I remember studying for a PDE exam. It was our final for partial differential equations. And I was like, if I don't pass this class, I have to switch to aerospace engineering, meaning I have to do CFD. And Northrop might not want me. They might not want an aerospace engineer. They might not want a 5-year senior. They might only want what I have. So I need to do well on this test and perform. I don't have a choice. And so when I sat down and studied for it, I'm not a studier, but I made myself sit down for like a full day straight, 8 hours, and just study. And like half the time I would read a line of text, not absorb any of it, read it again, not absorb any of it, and then move on to the next line because I just did not grasp it at all. But I didn't really give myself a choice.
Hmm.
I think it's just this internal compulsion. I think honestly, a lot of athletes have it. Grace and I were talking the other day about dissociation and how that affects people. We watched this really awesome movie called it's called like Aria or something like that. It's a story of a stripper who works in New York, and a young guy comes in and he's like hitting on her and stuff, and he like asks her to come back to his place. And so she meets him there the next day, and it's this enormous mansion. The kid's like 18. It's an enormous mansion. It's stunning. So he pays her to fuck him, and she finds out that his dad is a Russian oligarch. So he pays her to be his girlfriend and like hang out and fuck all the time. And they get drunk in Vegas and they get married. And his parents find out and they're like, you married an American prostitute and now you're an American citizen. We're getting this annulled. So the whole movie is about them annulling that marriage and whatnot. But in the movie, there were a lot of really accurate dancing scenes with the strippers and exotic dancers. And apparently that the lead actress learned how to do the dances and actually worked in a club for a while to get an understanding of how to play this character, which I have a huge amount of respect for. Although it's really difficult to see some of those scenes because they're very real. And I think that I would really love one day to own a strip club to give the women working there an opportunity to actually like perfect their craft in a way that's respected. Because my heart goes out to people who work hard and are underappreciated. But we were talking about dissociation because a lot of dancers do. And it was similar listening to the way that dancers dissociate to how athletes dissociate. Because when I'm rowing, my brain turns off. I don't have independent thought anymore. I just do what I know and I do it as hard as I can. And so I can toggle that. I can do it right now if I want to slip into that like mental state.
Yeah.
It's kind of like how Mike Tyson used to get hypnotized before fights
Yeah.
to like lock in. I think all athletes have that. And I think that when I go into, now we're weaving, doing the Trump weave. I think that when I go into a external deadline mode, I flip that switch and it's like, this is what I'm doing. Like, I'm just going to do it. I'm going to do it until I work my fingers to the bone. And then I'm going to keep doing it after that, until it's done.
Well, also at the same time too, and kind of how I see you explaining the internal and external deadlines, and also in relation to the anecdote about Arya, the stripper movie. It's like when she was preparing for that movie, it seems as though she had an external deadline to make this movie happen and make it good. And she made internal deadlines for herself to practice and get into the field and understand what's going on so that she could have a better result in her external deadline.
Yeah.
And kind of similarly, it seems like when you have an external deadline, you make it internally super important to you so that you place internal deadlines within yourself in order to meet the external deadlines. So I think it kind of always goes back to internal deadlines. Maybe that's part of the reason why internal deadlines for people maybe like us who can meet external deadlines no matter what, internal deadlines are so valuable even when they're on their own because we're able to create them and meet them regardless of whether there's an external thing or not there.
Right.
Yeah.
And I would say a trick, because not everybody has that. Not everybody is going to respond to internal deadlines, whether or not there is an external deadline.
Yeah.
A trick to that is to make other people dependent on it. So for rowing, if I wasn't fast enough, then my whole boat would suffer. And that's an external deadline that you can't ignore. And I mean, you can choose to not give a fuck and everyone can hate you, and that's fine. Live your life. But I think that most people, if you have a good work ethic, but maybe struggle to hit deadlines or like really lock in, having it be a team success versus an independent success is a really great way of getting yourself to unlock potential that you didn't think that you had. Because it's kind of like a mother being able to lift her car off a baby, right? It's like if you're doing it for other people, you have more strength than you would if you were just doing it for yourself.
Yeah. Yeah. Fair point. Through these, through these challenges that you face and the things you have to tackle, what is the primary thing today that keeps you motivated to keep going? Right? Like you create these habits and these internal deadlines and you have these goals you want to meet. But it's easy to have dreams about that stuff. And it's harder to have goals concretely set and like things that you are doing on a day-to-day basis. How do you keep
Right.
yourself motivated? Or do you think it's just an internal clock and pressure that you have that you've built up in order to achieve those things? What do you think it is?
When I consider my life and my progress with where I'm at, there's a micro scale and a macro scale. So on the macro scale, I'm very young. I make good money for the age that I am. I'm paid right now in 2024. I get $80,000 a year as an engineer, and I'm working a stable 9 to 5. And I have money in an S&P 500 account. Right. So by all metrics, I'm in a good place, especially for my age.
Yeah.
Macro scale, micro scale. I slept in today because I stayed up late last night watching the race. And then I had a business meeting that, wasn't exactly what I was imagining it being, and now I've got a bunch of work ahead of me. And then after this, I have to go meal prep. And then tomorrow I have work in the morning. Fuck. Like today isn't the best day on the micro scale. On a macro scale, I'm doing pretty well. So I think that I can choose to look at it in whatever lens suits me. And that's really awesome because when I'm having a day that's kind of shitty like today, I can remind myself like, hey, dude, like I can still pay for rent next month.
Yeah.
And if I'm feeling the opposite, where I'm like, dude, today was a great day, right? And I'm exactly where I want to be at, and I'm doing well in life. I can think to myself, well, dude, you're only making $80,000 as a 24-year-old. How the fuck are you going to be a millionaire by 25? That's not going to happen. Like, button get to work. So it's just all framing. It's all framing, but I try to keep it positive. So if I'm not having a good day, I remind myself that, I don't go hungry and
Yeah.
I'm healthy. And if I'm having a particularly good day, I'll humble myself by saying there's more work to do.
I think it's important. I've found, maybe not recently, I mean, maybe recently with respect to my whole life, but for a little bit now, I've been trying to be thankful for like all the things that I do have and all the things that I'm able to do. And I've found that that really helps my mental state, especially if I have a bad day. Like every night before I go to bed, um, I tell myself how thankful I am for X, Y, and Z, and thankful for the opportunities that I have, and thankful for the challenges and the hardships and the successes that I've had along the way. I feel like that's a really healthy way to kind of recenter yourself out of a bad state of mind into one that can be more productive.
It's gonna sound weird, but whenever I have those thoughts where I'm like, oh, it's not a good day. I'm not doing well. I'm not performing. I think about what life would be like if I got in a car accident on the way home and I was paralyzed from the neck down.
Yeah, yeah. I think about stuff like that too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or
I was like, at least I can walk.
yeah,
You know what I mean? Like I think a lot about, honestly, I think about it in relation to my accident, and how I could have gone away from that accident completely being changed physically. Like I could have gotten hurt, genuinely, right? And like there are times, like, this is not every day. I don't want to make it sound like every single day I like think about, oh, you know what I mean? But like there are definitely days where I get into my car and I'm like, you know, it's such a blessing that I am able to drive my car and like use my legs and like shift and steer. Like I could be paralyzed. I could be in a wheelchair, and it's like, man, I am, at least from my perspective, I feel so blessed to be able to do that stuff and enjoy my life and to accomplish these things as a healthy young guy in, an amazing country with amazing opportunity. Like I feel so thankful for that.
yeah.
And that's not something that I think I had earlier in my life. And it's funny. I don't know. Maybe this is different for you because you always grew up in Florida, but in Massachusetts there was like this odd aura of like the United States is fucked up. It's all screwed up. Everything's bad. Defund all the programs because they're all racist and they're all, sexist and they're all misogynistic and blah, blah, blah. Like, screw this country, blah, blah. And I kind of absorbed that, in my early years. And I never really, like, looking back, I never was like thankful for like, man, like I live in a great country. Like I could be in a communist nation right now. Like I could be wondering what books I can read and what I can't read. Right.
There's another world where your grandmother didn't come over here, and that's exactly what
Yes,
you wrote.
exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. And like I feel like I'm in part thankful for that experience because it's let me really value what I have today. But I also see that as really destructive because I don't think everyone gets out of that state of mind. And some people live their whole life that way.
Yeah.
And it's like, what benefit does that have to you? Like, how does it help you to think that everything is terrible in your life?
Right.
Or like, the system's screwed up and it's rigged against you and you're never going to make it and everything's bad and everyone's sexist and racist and homophobic and, transphobic and, anti-Semitic and blah, blah, blah. Like that was a lot of the rhetoric I got in Massachusetts was like, everyone is bad.
Right.
And it's like, it was especially odd because there was a lot of rhetoric that was directly related to like white males specifically are bad. And you see that as an increasing over the years. And it's like, I don't feel like I'm a bad person, like I've probably done some bad things and I've probably made some bad jokes and I've probably offended some people and I've probably made a lot more people than I've offended laugh. And it's like that rhetoric I feel is really destructive, did you experience that when you were younger at all? Do you see it more kind of morphing into society as in where you are today? Like, how has that changed for you?
I didn't experience any of it growing up. I
Gotcha.
heard about it when the internet started to get popular.
It's
I
wild.
was in high school. Yeah.
Should go back in time and experience it. It's crazy.
No, I've never experienced it
Yeah.
firsthand. I've never talked to people like that. Like I grew up.
That was like 80% of my class.
That's fucking insane.
Yeah.
That's insane. I
Yeah.
grew up very patriotic. So I would take, you take your hat off at the baseball games, put your hand on your heart for the national anthem, right?
Yep.
But
They had to take the American flag down in our classrooms, I think in 7th or 8th grade. We had them up for like 4th, 5th, and 6th.
why did
They took them down in 7th and 8th because I don't remember exact reason. I mean, I was young. I was like 13,
Right.
But essentially they were like, we're pushing an agenda that we shouldn't be pushing. Like I used to sing the national
Americanism?
Yeah, like I used to sing the national anthem in like 4th, 5th, and 6th grade. And by the time I got to 7th and 8th, and especially in high school, we never sang it. We used to sing it every morning,
The whole national anthem or the Pledge of Allegiance?
Pledge of Allegiance. I'm
Yeah.
sorry. I misspoke.
Yeah. And deal with me. I don't know why they stopped.
Yeah, and like why? Like you live in an amazing country. And it's like, yes, if you disagree with some of the things we've done and you disagree with, this aspect or you want this improved, I get it. But like that improvement doesn't start with hating where you're at.
Right.
Right? It starts with loving where you're at and wanting it to get better. It doesn't start with wanting to destroy what is today to build something new in your vision.
Yeah.
Right? Especially when you have something as incredible as like the Constitution, like a really incredible document for, a bunch of guys, essentially our age, putting together.
White guys.
Yeah.
Oh, so they're big. But I grew up, I mean, both of my grandfathers flew for the Marines. So I have military in my family. So my parents grew up as military brats moving all around whatever base that their dads were stationed at. So I grew up with my parents telling me like, hey, you don't have to move from school to school to school. You don't have to make new friends. You don't have to get used to new houses. Like we had to do that growing up, trying to build a home for you where you don't have to do that. But you need to understand and respect the fact that other kids go through that. Other kids don't have the type. I mean, we were middle class. We weren't like upper middle class or anything, but they were like, other kids don't have the money that we have. I remember my mom telling me a story about she grew up so poor that she only had one pair of jeans. And so all winter she had to wear the same pair of jeans and it had a peacock embroidered on the back.
Oh, yeah.
And eventually one of the girls realized that she was wearing the same jeans every day because of this peacock. And so she started making fun of her for it. My mom told me that growing up. She was like, listen, like if you see kids doing that, like you don't know what their home life is like.
Yeah.
Maybe their parents are fighting for this country so that they have the ability to go to a school and can like eat and not go to bed hungry. And some kids are going to bed hungry. So like just treat everyone with respect.
Yeah.
But I wrote a lot of essays for the Veterans of Foreign Wars Association, the VFW. And I won a lot of them. So I got the opportunity to go to a lot of conventions and speak in front of thousands of veterans. And as a 12-year-old, having like 80-year-olds come up to you and like thank you for the writing that you did feels really weird because I should be thanking you because you're the one who dedicated your life to this country. And when you're put in that position, you actually do realize how grateful you are for the place that you live and the people who sacrificed for it. And I feel that a lot of people could do with more interactions with veterans. And it's a shame to see that doesn't happen. But I think that a large reason that people push the rhetoric that they do about how unfair everything is and how bad other people are and how tortured they are is that if the world isn't fair, then it's okay to fail. It's like an excuse. It's a reason. So like, it's okay that you aren't where you want to be because there's systemic racism or, the white people hate you or whatever, like whatever, pick whatever boogeyman you want to hit. But I grew up very grateful for the country that I live in. And it really hit in my senior year of high school. We had a guest speaker come in because there were a lot of reports of kids getting drunk like on weekends and stuff. And I went to like a really fucking preppy, like academic college prep high school. So parents were complaining about it to the administration because they were like, my sweet boy is hanging out with other riffraff at the school and you need to expel them. So they had someone come in to give a speech on drinking and driving, and he was in a wheelchair. And the whole point of his speech was essentially like, dude, every time you think about drinking and driving, wiggle your toes.
Yeah.
Because I can't anymore because I got in an accident and I'm paralyzed from the waist down. And so I do the same thing sometimes. Sometimes when I'm feeling like a little shitty, I'm like, just be grateful for what you had. So I wiggle my toes. Or when I have like sometimes I'll realize like, oh, like I don't have a pimple in my nose today, so I can go like this and it doesn't hurt. Or I don't have a canker sore, so I can go with my mouth and it doesn't hurt. And like I'm 24 years old and I don't have any injuries. So like I can swing my arms around and I can jump and do deep squats and like it doesn't hurt. And I know that there's going to be a day in my 70s if I make it that all when it's going to hurt to stand up. So like enjoy what you have while you have it because you won't always.
100%. So you're very motivated. You're patriotic. You have a lot of good foundational values. Is there anything in your life today that is a complete non-negotiable that may have been negotiable in your past?
My health.
Your health.
So when I grew up kind of just like not really I kind of just listened to what I was told as a kid. So like if my mom made a casserole, she would be like, "This is healthy for you." And I'd be like, "Got it." So like I didn't learn the food pyramid. I don't know what carbs are. I didn't learn any of that shit. I didn't know what carb loading was until my senior year of high school, and I had been doing it before every race for the first 3 years of my fucking career in racing. Um, but I just kind of did what I was told. And fortunately, I had great coaches that told me exercise was good and eating clean was good. Um, but I kind of just did what I was told and didn't really think twice about it. So when I go to the doctor and they tell me that they need antibiotics, I take them, like I don't question it. And I've been very fortunate to not have health issues so far. But when the COVID vaccine came out, I was like, man, this seems really rushed. It seems like it's being pushed really hard.
Yeah.
And I feel that my rights are being stepped on by not being allowed outside or having to wear this mask. I remember FIT tried to make me row in a face mask and I told them to fuck themselves. Every single day they would come to the gym. They'd be like, "Put your mask on." And I'd be like, "Why don't you go fuck yourself?" And they would be like, "Okay." And they would leave. But like, that's my right. Like, if I don't want to wear a mask, I'm not going to fucking wear a mask. And so it just like felt off for me. I didn't trust the vaccine at first. And I told myself until it gets FDA approved, I'm not getting it. And so my girlfriend at the time, who had an autoimmune disorder, was like, "Hey, my parents won't let me see you until you get the vaccine." And I was like, "Have they read about it at all? Like anything?" And she was like, "Yeah, they're like reading all the news articles and shit." And I was like, "I think we're reading different articles, but also maybe use some common sense." And we had disagreements on it. But I wanted to see my girlfriend. And my mom, similarly, every day would fucking press me, sending me articles and all this shit about how great the vaccine is and how I should get it because you're keeping the other people safe. And ultimately, I got so fucking fed up with it that as soon as it was FDA approved, I was like, fine, fucking stop bothering me. And I got the vaccine. I got Pfizer. I got the Pfizer and then the first one and the second one.
Yeah, that's what I got too.
Yeah. And then after that, I had like a really big like awakening in myself where I was like, why did I do that? Right? It's like cheating on your girlfriend, where afterwards you're like, why the fuck did I do that? Like I should have just, if I was unhappy in my relationship, I should have just broken up with her and then I can go do what I want. So in this, it was like, if I don't like the way my mom and girlfriend are talking to me and treating me, then stop talking to them.
Yeah.
Like so my health will never come in question again, which is why now it doesn't matter what my girlfriend or doctor tell me. If they want to put me on statins for cholesterol, you're gonna have to show me some damn good evidence as to why, because I don't want to take pills. So when it comes to my health, I'm really, really particular about it.
Yeah. Yeah. I hear that. I hear that. I think I've had a similar revelation.
Yeah.
Um,
Dude, honestly, my first thought when I saw my cholesterol levels was I was like, did the COVID vaccine do this? Because I didn't have high cholesterol before then.
yeah.
Um,
Well, something crazy too. While we're on the topic of pharmaceutical drugs and vaccines,
again,
um, there's been very few to no new developments in regards to antibiotics within the past like 20 years or so. Very few. And the reason for that is because, or at least the speculated reason for that, is because antibiotics solve a problem. They aren't they aren't turning one problem into a chronic disease for life. And so it's very hard to make money off of an antibiotic because it's something you give to someone for a couple of weeks and they're good.
right.
You know what I mean? There's this huge investment and a huge uprising in like the amount of like chronic disease we have, like stuff that like people just take drugs forever on. And like if you look at it from a money perspective, it starts to seem like, oh, okay, like there isn't an incentive to cure. There's an incentive to make it just sick enough for life to where it's curable, but we're not going to cure it,
Right.
you know? And that's really scary to me.
And when that's the case, this is conspiracy. Like,
Yeah.
if that's the case, wouldn't it be so lucrative to tell everybody to take a vaccine that's going to keep other people safe and stop themselves from getting sick, but then subtly implants chronic disease in all those people to make them more dependent on whatever medication that comes about for them.
You know what's even crazier is Pfizer recently, well, about 6 months ago or 8 months ago, purchased a company that deals with complications due to vaccines.
Yeah.
So they not only own the revenue coming from the vaccines, they also make money off of the vaccine being bad.
Yep.
Because then they also make money in all the related cures and all this other stuff in regards to vaccine complications.
Yeah.
It's like you selling a car and then selling it without oil, but then also having a motor rebuild shop right next door.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's like,
I'll sell you a lemon and then charge you to fix it.
right. Exactly. It's wild to me.
Right.
I have 2 more questions in this section that are the same. They're a repeat question from earlier when you were talking about where you were before your business ventures. And the first one is, what is your biggest challenge you're facing today, and how are you working to overcome it?
I think my biggest challenge is probably what business venture to follow. I'm kind of at a crossroads right now where I have several different options I can take. I can switch paths entirely to something completely different and new. I can continue down the same path that I have been traveling, though I'm taking a different vehicle. Or I can tangent off of the path that I'm on to something similar, but unknown. So I think that the challenge I'm facing right now is, what do I do about it? I think that the next week will probably be a lot of sitting and thinking and not much actual doing. I think a lot of it's going to be probably time at the beach. I think really well at the beach.
I do like the beach.
I'm going to see if I can take a rowing shell out with a couple guys, because I think really well on the water too. Or actually, usually it's when I come back. Usually while I'm on the water, I don't think of anything, but when I come back, good ideas hit me.
That's how racing is for me.
Yeah.
I really like, when I'm really stressed, I go like karting at like K1.
Yeah.
Or something like that. And it really helps. Like, I feel like a new person when I leave the karting place.
Yeah.
Like, my mom always used to tell me, if it's true or not. Like, anytime I was sad, she'd be like, let's go karting. And we drive out to like Western Mass, 35 minutes, and go karting just a couple races.
Yeah.
And then drive back. And she'd be like, you look so much better now. Like, like she'd say stuff like your sparkle is back in your eyes. Like stuff like that moms say, you know what I mean?
Your mom says. My mom says it to me. She'd be like, stop fucking tucking your chin down. Put your chin up like this. You look fat. But yeah, I understand that.
Yeah.
Karting is expensive, but also karting doesn't come naturally. Yeah, sim racing. Those things, I would love to sim race if you want to do it. But
I just got it set up again 3 or 4 days ago.
Yeah. No, I'd love to do it. Yeah. It doesn't come naturally to me yet. I still have to focus on it, but rowing comes so naturally to me that I can lock in and just like fucking zone out.
Right.
And that's when ideas hit me. But I think it's not stress. I'm not stressed. I just have decisions to make. It's kind of like on its face. I was talking to my investor earlier today, not ours anymore. But as we were talking, I was like, oh yeah, like I have cholesterol that's twice the healthy limit. I think my parents are getting divorced. Sander left the business. And then now I'm going to have to figure out how to take on more liability with the business if I move forward with you. And he was like, are you okay? And I was like, yeah. And he was like, is Sander okay? I was like, yeah. He was like, are you guys okay? I was like, yeah. It's like the conversation we're having right now.
Yeah.
Things are changing, or Hermosi says like nothing is good or bad. It just is. And then you can frame it however you want. If I can choose how to frame it, like I'm just going to frame it as neutral, and then it'll work itself out in the long run. So it's like,
if you're staring out a cloudy window on a rainy afternoon, you're just depressed. But if you have a cigar in your mouth, you're a philosopher.
Yeah. And Grace does this sometimes. Like I'll be like staring blankly, and she'll be like, "Are you okay?" I'm like, "Yeah." And she was like, "You just got really quiet and like just like started staring." I'm like, "Yeah." She's like, "Like, do you feel upset?" I'm like, "No." She's like, "Do you feel sad?" I'm like, "No." She's like, "Do you feel anything?" I'm like, I'm just fucking neutral.
Yeah.
So that's kind of where I'm at. I just have to, in my neutrality, I have to figure out which way I want to go.
Fair enough. So my last question, similarly to the first section, is how would you rate yourself today on a scale of 1 to 10? Referencing long-term and personal now.
Okay. Definitely better than the last one. I said 5 out of 10 on the last one. I don't think I'm perfect. The areas in which I want to improve are not crystal clear, which is ironic because I think that to be perfect is to recognize that you aren't perfect. So in recognizing I'm not perfect, paradoxically, maybe I am. So figure out what number that is. I don't know. I would say I've made significant progress, but I haven't had the amount of experience that I would like to have in my life. So maybe an 8. Maybe
Is that personal now, how you see it, or referencing who you will be?
referencing who I will be.
8 out of 10.
8 out of 10. For who I am now, in terms of what my ability is today
Mhm.
to be a better person, I don't see much room for improvement for where I am now. So whereas before I would have rated myself a 10 out of 10, I would say that I'm going to rate myself a 9 out of 10 now because I recognize that I'm not perfect even if I don't know where I am yet. So for me personally today, 9 out of 10. In the long run, I think 8 out of 10.
Got it. Cool. Sweet. We are on to our third section, the future. The maybe the fun part. I don't know. Hopefully. So
My future.
Yes.
You haven't seen the Simpsons episode about me detailing my successes?
Not yet.
Well,
Maybe
that's
it's to be released.
That's not a good sign. Simpsons is canceled. Like I'm fucking. If I didn't make a Simpsons episode, I guess I'm not gonna be that special in my.
Womp womp. Maybe it's out there. You never know. Maybe someone will find it and post it on TikTok 20 years from now.
That would be so good.
That'd be cool. What challenges do you anticipate to face in the future? Starting off with the broad one.
Near term or far term?
Let's do both.
Near term, I think the challenges that I'm going to face are probably how am I going to afford living? Am I going to quit my job? If I do, how am I going to pay for rent? If I don't quit my job, how am I going to how am I going to build a business and pay for it? While also working a full 9 to 5. I think that's probably my most immediate challenge. Long term, I think the challenge is going to be how do I know when to push or pivot in that business? So with whatever business I take, do I try to run that up the tree to billions or do I sell it and then push or pivot? Actually, I was talking to someone recently who's thinking about selling their business. And I was like, why? And they were like, well, I want money to do this other thing. So I need the capital to do that. And I was like, why not just take out a loan to do that? Like you have steady income from this business that you have. They were like, I don't know. Like, it's just kind of like, takes up more time than I want it to. And like, it's a big chunk of money that I can put towards this other thing that might not take as much time. And I look at that and I go, man, I don't know if you have enough experience in that other thing to know if it's not going to take as much time or not. And it's an outside perspective. I don't live in their life. I don't know what it's like to run that business, but I just thought to myself, man, I don't know.
That's a tough one. It's a tough one.
Yeah.
Do you see yourself as running into any mental barriers in the future, or things that you will have to overcome that you feel are, in the previous part you rated yourself as a 9 out of 10 today, right? Out of that 1 out of 10 part, do you feel like there are certain things that you will have to tackle in the future that you're maybe not ready or not capable to tackle today outside of the ones that you listed?
I think the reason I'm not a 10 out of 10 is because I haven't identified or I'm not able to identify what I can improve on right now. And that in itself is a fault, which takes a point off. So my previous one, in the past, I rated myself a 10 out of 10 because I was like, I'm awesome and I will never be better than awesome. I'm just perfect. But now I recognize that I'm not perfect, but I can't quite put my finger on what it is. So once I figure out what it is I can improve, I'm still a 9 out of 10 until I can improve upon it. Then maybe I'll be briefly a 10 out of 10 before I realize there's something else too. I don't know what I can improve on right now. I feel that, there are skills I can get better at, but overall, like as a person, like with my morality and how I carry myself and how I treat others, I think I'm very content with who I am.
And kind of piggyback off of the push or pivot idea, I guess this comes at a time where you're kind of in a questioning phase of where to go. But one of the things I have written down here is, how do you see your current path developing in the coming years, and where do you see yourself potentially going long term? Maybe if you can't say from a concrete business perspective because of the push or pivot idea, maybe from a lifestyle perspective or from a mental perspective or a physical perspective? Like,
Mhm.
do you see yourself as a bodybuilder and, someone with, great physical strength? Do you see yourself as a race car driver? Do you see yourself as like a family guy and dad, kind of just chilling in a big house with his kids? Or do you see yourself as kind of like a lavish lifestyle that's kind of more akin to like a party and fun time kind of feel? Where do you see yourself going?
It's funny you mentioning because in that movie, with the Russian oligarch's son,
Mm,
they have this montage of, like, what it's like to live because the girl starts to spend time with him, and it's like, "What's his life like?" And it's like, fucking wake up at noon and rip a bong, and then get go to the club at fucking 2 PM to get breakfast, and then, like, go fucking do lines of cocaine and, like, get ready for the evening, and then you go to this lavish dinner where you're dancing on the table and, like, crazy shit, and then you get in a helicopter to go to the docks, like,
yeah.
there's a lot of shit, and I leaned over to Grace, and I was like, "I've never wanted to be more, like, old money, refined rich,
Mm,
like a quiet breakfast on the beach with, like, mimosas and stuff than ever before right now." Like, I'm not the party animal guy. I'm not the Wolf of Wall Street crazy shit guy. I am the I want to use my money to like, for personal relaxation and use, like, if I were to blow a bunch of money on myself, it would not be, like, partying balls. It would be probably, like, a relaxing vacation and then some track time in a car. But I think that in terms of how I see myself as a whole, it's probably closer to Alex Hormozy than it is to Andrew Tate.
mm.
So,
In what ways?
much more reserved, not as much of a public figure, more focused on my business than what I have. Um,
Maybe more like a Tristan Tate if you were to compare the two Tates together.
I don't know him well enough.
Yeah, yeah. Well, that's kind of the point too,
Oh, got it.
right? Like he is
Yeah, yeah.
just as wealthy as Andrew is, but unless you research him, you don't know
Yeah,
a lot about him, right?
yeah. I like that Hormozy. I don't wanna get married, but I do wanna be with Grace for a long time, so maybe a similar relationship that Alex has with Layla, which is they work together in their business.
Mm,
I'd like that with Grace, but just without the marriage because 'cause I'm not a big marriage guy.
yeah.
Um, no kids. I definitely don't want kids for a long time, if ever. Um, but just focused on my business, and then when I take my time to relax, I don't do anything crazy that would put, like, my health in danger or anything like that, apart from racing, which I guess does put your health in danger.
Mm,
But I think that's who I see myself being.
hmm, hmm. Well, why do you say no marriage and no kids?
Which do you want me to answer first?
Either, whichever, however you see fit.
Kids is easy. No kids right now because I don't have the money to take care of them.
Mm,
No kids in the future because I don't know if I wanna take the time or patience to take care of them. Um, Also, I feel that having kids puts an enormous amount of stress on a person, and I don't want that. I don't want to constantly worry for the health and safety of an entire life that is my responsibility. Um, I feel that I care so much that if I did have a kid, I would kill myself trying to get them to live their best life, you know?
mm,
And I also think that if they just fundamentally are a different type of person than me, then I would probably resent them. 'Cause I've given up 2 decades of my life to raise this thing that wants to be a fucking art major. I don't want that, right?
yeah.
If they grow up to be someone that I don't respect, that would be really disheartening to me.
Mm.
Not
Is that
because
associated with fear or disappointment?
probably disappointment. It would be a big disappointment. And not as a reflection on myself, but just that when you invest in a business and when you put all of your time and love and money and passion into a business, um odds are it will grow and it will be what you want it to be. Like you can turn your vision into a reality if it's a tangible thing. Like if you're gonna build a car, you can picture it. You're like, oh, I want a Miata with turbochargers instead of headlights, and I want it to be an LS swap, and I want a second engine in the trunk. You can build exactly that. But when you're working with a kid, I mean, they change every day, all the way up until they're 25. And even then, people grow all the time.
Yeah,
And so I would be investing a lot of time and energy into something that I have no control over, and I cannot ensure that it becomes what I want it to. And in a way, that's a good thing because I don't think anybody should be exactly what they want what their parents want them to be. You should be what you want to be, right? So right now, I'm definitely not what my parents want. I think my parents wanted someone who's committed to the 9 to 5 and gets married and has kids and has the white picket fence, and I'm not that. And maybe they aren't happy with me for that, but I don't care because it's what I want to be. But I don't think I would be prepared for that with a kid.
yeah. Do you think that the potential disappointment as a result of the lack of uh, control you would have over the upbringing of a child is also kind of a related mindset into why you don't want to get married. Like that lack of control over like what could happen in a divorce or like potential funds being split or business issues and stuff like that.
No, it's different than that. I used to be a little sketched out. Yeah, when I was in a relationship where I was not confident in its longevity, I was worried about money. I was dating someone who did not have a high paying job and had no aspirations to have a high paying job and didn't really care about money and they didn't mind. But also we had a lot of problems in our relationship that we weren't working out effectively. And so there was a fear that was like, oh, well, they don't care about money, so they're not going to earn much. And there's a risk that if we do end up getting divorced, she gets to take half and I don't get to keep what I've earned.
Yeah.
Because once you get married, legally, every dollar that you make past being married is split evenly between the two of you.
Yeah.
And if I'm the one who cares about money and is, making that money, then I have to share it with them. And you can sign prenups and stuff like that. But ultimately, I've heard from marriage lawyers that nothing is absolutely ironclad. They can still take you through court, and even if you get your way at the end, you pay legal fees. It's just a nightmare. But that's betting on. I actually talked to my financial advisor about this because he was like, "Marriage is the best thing that can ever happen to you. You should do it." And I was like, "I appreciate your perspective, but no." And he was like, "Well, you shouldn't be getting married to someone who you're afraid of divorcing because that's betting on failure. And if you have even a thought, then they're not the right person to marry." Um, but I've seen that by people in the ass all the time. I know how the honeymoon stage works. For the first 5 years you are dating someone, you're deeply in love and it's very passionate, and then it gets dull. And in your sixth and seventh year, it starts to become mundane and regular. And it's regular love. I actually have this really interesting comparison. There is alkaloid love, and then there's noble love. So like noble gases versus alkaloid metals.
Mm.
One is very reactive and it's very like, wild, and one is very stable. And the reactive one is more exciting because with alkali metals you can make explosives and nuclear bombs. But with noble gases, it's like you can make neon. And that's kind of it. Everything else is just like they're building blocks, right? And a lot of people get really hooked on the alkali part and then get bored with the noble gases. And I'm anticipating that in my current relationship. I think that around the 5 or 6 year mark, it's going to start to become boring. And I want to prepare myself for that because I'm in it for the long haul and I want to stay together. But I feel that one of the reasons that people succumb to divorce is because they make their relationship a problem for other people. Meaning, I think that the reason people want to get married is so that they can dress up and they can say that they love each other in front of other people, and other people can see how pretty I look in my dress, and other people can try my wedding cake, and other guys can come see how great my bachelor party is. It's a way to display your love to other people, right? It's a way to celebrate your love with people that you care about. And that's awesome for the people who want to do it, but that makes me personally sick because I want my relationship to be in my relationship. I don't care how other people see it. And I don't really want other people to see it. It's private. My life. Like I don't want you involved, right? And I don't feel a need to show other people. So if other people come up to me and they're like, "Oh, I don't see a ring on your finger." It's like, "Yeah, but I'm in a committed relationship." And a committed relationship for 6 days versus a committed relationship for 16 years should be taken with the same gravity, which is, "Oh, you're taken, so I'm not going to try to like hook up with you or, like test your relationship at all."
Yeah.
So with marriage, I just see it as essentially it's doing a lot of paperwork and spending a lot of money just to show other people something that you should really already know. And I don't feel the need to show other people. The only person I need to show that I love is the person who I love, and that's it.
Do you feel like in a way by thinking that your relationship will get boring after 5 or 6 years, do you feel like you're planning for that failure almost?
Oh, it's not failure. I don't
Okay.
I don't think that boring is failure.
Okay.
Um, so it's actually in rowing, you in a 2,000 meter race, you start really fast, like 50 strokes a minute, like super quick to get the boat up to speed.
Mm.
But you can't keep that pace the entire time. You have to get the boat from its standstill to full speed as quick as possible, but you can't keep that pace the entire time. So after the first like 200 meters or so, you settle. So you settle from like 50 strokes a minute down to like 40 strokes a minute. And then you stay there for most of the race. Maybe you like kick it up a little bit around the halfway mark for 10 or 12 strokes, just to like, we call it a middle move to like build on the boat. And then at the end, you go into your sprint, right? And I feel that I've always loved the first stroke of the settle because you're going from really fast to like suddenly slowing down. So it's like you're going from like a high revving, low torque engine suddenly to a lower revving, high torque engine. So it's a fucking huge monster, powerful stroke and a really slow recovery. And you can feel the weight of the boat. I absolutely love it. I love the settle in rowing. And I love that in relationships too, because it's when you get into a routine and a pattern of knowing the person so well that you don't have to spend time trying to figure them out. You just know each other.
Yeah.
And I think that if it's the right person, that gives you the opportunity to start to build something really great with them, like a business or family, depending on who you are. But I feel that most people view that as boring and non-exciting and not engaging, and then they don't want to be a part of it anymore.
Yeah.
Especially so with my previous relationship. I mean, we dated from my sophomore year of high school to my senior year of college, which is probably the period of the most amount of change in a person's life. Especially, as your hormones develop, as your brain finishes developing, when you start to figure out what kind of career you want, or you start to figure out your political stance. So like we got along really, really well in high school, but as we developed into adults, we just are different people. And
Yeah.
that's okay. But now that we're adults, I feel that Grace and I we're very mature for our age and are set in the type of people that we want to become, and those roads are parallel, so we can walk together.
Cool. Cool. Um, you have the mindset you have today, right? About these few things and a couple other things that we've gone over. Do you anticipate any sort of mindset shifts as you go into the future and grow relative to how you are today? Do you like foresee yourself changing in a certain way or down a certain path, or are you kind of where you are at today and you kind of don't know how you would change, but you know that you will change in some ways?
I think that I will probably get more empathetic
Hmm.
in that right now, when I look at people who don't have the things that they want, I also don't have what I want. So we're in the same seat. The difference is I'm working my ass off to try to get what I want. And that person, this hypothetical person, is not. So right now, I have very little empathy because you aren't trying as hard as I am. So if you don't end up getting what you want, tough shit, you should have tried harder. But I think that as I go through the gauntlet of getting what I want and seeing the success that I want to see, I think I'll have a better appreciation for exactly how difficult it is and start to empathize with people who have not gone through that effort, because it is a lot of effort. And I'm starting to see that now, but I think I'll really see that as I get older. I think also when I get older, I'll start to care more about my legacy than I do right now. But that's just a hunch. I've got nothing to back that up. I just see a lot of men in their 40s start to care about the legacy they leave behind. Elon Musk is
Do you feel like you don't care about the legacy now?
Yeah,
Gotcha.
correct.
Gotcha.
I don't really
Well,
mind.
maybe part of the reason we're doing this podcast is because you anticipate in the future you will care about the legacy and where you
Yeah,
came from, right? So
yeah.
I guess that's kind of a tie-in to today.
Well, the podcast, I really love the podcast because it documents who we are in different stages of our life,
Yeah.
and how we grow or how we don't grow. And when we see the most success, who are we at that moment? So like right now, I have very little success, and I can go back and see who I am today. And in 10 years, maybe I have some success and I can look at that too. But I see a lot of men in their 40s start to care about their legacy. Elon Musk, I think he's older than it. He's in his 50s now, I think. But he's starting to care about like humanity as a whole and how he can impact that, which is
Yeah.
in a sense legacy. Um, and I see that as a common trend amongst men. And so I anticipate there must be some hormonal shift at some point in your 50s or 40s.
Yeah. You talked a little bit about uh wanting to live an old money style of life,
Yeah.
right? Um, do you think that your balance between kind of work, play, and that old money lifestyle that you envision will change as you grow and or become more wealthy?
I sure hope there's a lot more play involved because right now it's a whole lot of work. I would like to I would like to take the ability to take like a week off to go to Monaco with you and watch a race and like enjoy gelato on a yacht. Whereas right now I was actually talking to Josh, the guy who runs bingo at Pauhana the other day, because he's taking, I think, a week or two off to go visit his family up north. And he was like, "Are you going out of town?" And I was like, "I don't really go out of town." And he was like, "Oh, what was the last vacation you took?" And I was like, "I took 2 days off of work to go to Miami to see Grace's family in June. And before then was over a year ago where I took 2 days off of work to go to Wisconsin." So like since I've started working, apart from Christmas and I didn't travel, I haven't taken more than like 2 days off at a time to travel somewhere.
Yeah.
Or like to take time off. Um, so, I mean, really, like, even when I do take that time off, the trip to Miami was fun, but, like, we didn't ball out. We kinda balled on a budget. We were like, "Okay, we have a spending like, this is gonna be a $1,000 trip, so, like, whatever we can fit into the $1,000, let's go have fun, but let's not break the bank." Um, I'd really love to have trips where I'm not so worried about that.
Yeah.
Kinda like, I can go and not have to worry about how much dinner costs and not have to worry if the jet ski costs too much money, and just enjoy myself.
What are 3 places that you wanna go to in the coming years that you haven't been able to go to yet? 3 places or 3 activities you wanna do or
Mhm.
3 things that you wanna experience.
It's actually interesting that you mentioned that because my mom in high school, um, so here's how my family works. My dad goes to work every day and comes home tired and wants to just unwind and relax. My mom doesn't go to work and really wants to go travel and do fun adventures. So there's a constant battle between the two where my dad is like, I just want to sleep. I have to mow the lawn this weekend and cook food. Like just like I have to do all this shit. Like just let me rest. And my mom is like, we don't do anything ever. Let's go to Europe. And so my mom had this thought that if she can get my brother and I to back her, then we can all team up with my dad and get him to basically pay to take us to Europe. And growing up, I never cared.
Yeah.
I was like, I don't want to go see Europe. I don't want to go to Russia. I don't want to see the world. I don't give a shit. I like it here. Um, but as I've gotten older, I've realized there are some places that I would love to see, but more so than places are events. Um, so I would really love to go to some races. A Monaco Grand Prix is at the top of my list. It's a historic race. It's on both posters behind us are Monaco. Uh,
Yeah, true.
that was renewed in for Formula One through 2031, so that'll be here for the next 7 years at
Cool.
least. So hopefully I have an opportunity to go then. So Monaco is a big one just for that. Um, Honestly, I love the Keys. I would love to go back to the Key. I've been there before, but I'd love to go back. It helps me unwind. And I want to go to, I think Olympia National Park is in Washington, but I would love to spend like a solid month traveling through Olympic National Park. Olympia, I can't remember. They've got like 7 different biomes in one
Yeah.
national park. You can drive across the whole thing in like a day or
They got those cool geysers, right? Yeah, yeah. They're like
yes,
hot water maybe that's
yeah.
yes, yeah.
I don't know. It might be both, honestly, but
Maybe.
they have like a fucking like a rainforest and like snow-capped
Yeah.
mountains and like a beach and shit. Like they have so many different in redwoods. They've got so many different types of things. I would love to go see the nature there. Um, so racing in major races is one. I'd love to take part in racing wherever, if I can go. You said the next few years though, right?
Even longer than that, 20 years down the line.
Yeah,
Uh,
racing in major races would be really neat if I could get that opportunity if I were fast enough. Visiting the races at the very least would be cool. I'd love to see some national parks. And then there's one I'd like to see more cities. I've been to San Francisco and I hated it, and I've been to Miami and I loved it. And I want to see more of Miami, like the ritzier side of Miami, and then I want to see what other cities are out there that are pretty cool. Um, so I don't know. None of them. I haven't really given serious thought to many of them because I just don't have the money to go. So like, not really thinking about it. It's kind of like how I don't spec out an Aston Martin Valkyrie because it's a $3 million car and I don't have 6 pennies to rub together. So why waste my time specking one out? Um, so yeah,
is there anything you see today that you think is maybe out of reach for your future? Like, oh man, like, yeah, I don't know. Or like, is there anything that you see as unattainable, or do you feel like if you work hard enough and you persevere, you can get anything?
I think there's a potential for all of it to be unattainable because I could die tonight.
Fair enough.
I think if I live, and I'm fortunate enough to live, actually, there's an interesting theory out there that the first 500-year-old person has already been born.
Oh yeah,
Because right
yeah.
now, our average life expectancy is like 80 something. But by the time we're 50, they can expand that to 150. And by the time we're 100, they can expand that to 250. And by the time we're 200, they can get it to 500.
Yeah.
So maybe we'll actually be immortal and have no idea today. But if I die tomorrow, none of it's attainable. If I live, I don't see a reason why it can't be.
Cool. Very cool. And the last two questions of this section. What do you anticipate will be your biggest challenge in the future, and how do you think you'll be able to overcome it?
I think that people are going to try to cancel me eventually. I think probably some of these podcasts, which I love dearly, will come back up and people will get very upset because I use the word retard, or they pull the snippet from the last episode where I said, like Hitler thought that he was a hero, and if he had won World War II, then he would be.
Yeah.
Shit like
People will take that shit out of context.
Yeah, people take it out of context. I'm really fucking terrified of people planting shit on me, like being framed for a crime. So like getting pulled over and having a cop plant drugs in my car, but there not being a camera, or someone hacking in.
We went on one recently. This is gonna get me fucking canceled in the future for sure. A common one that, this is not to say that all of these cases are fraudulent, but there have been instances where sexual misconduct cases have been used against people in a fraudulent manner and have been proved to be false in court later on, but then never talked about. And these people have the stain that's over them their entire lives that is just not true. Yeah, that'll be taken out of context for sure.
Well, no, part of it is like I'm worried about that. I'm worried about people hacking into my laptop and like putting child porn on there. I'm worried about AI getting big enough to like falsify videos of me committing crimes. I'm worried about all kinds of shit. Like
I would never kill myself. Those kinds of things, right?
Honestly. But the problem with saying that on a podcast or something is that, like, if I say today, like, hey, man, I'm really worried about someone framing me for sexual assault, and then 20 years later, this video comes up and I'm like at trial for sexual assault, people looking at that will go, oh, well, he was thinking about this 20 years ago. Right. So it's part of who he is his nature.
Even if it has no backing at all,
when in fact it's the opposite, right? I'm worried that someone is going to frame me for this because that is the type of person that I think is deplorable and I don't ever want to be. But with the way that the public and the media works today, they can write anything they want about you. I mean,
it seems as though like almost your biggest concern is like when people seeing what they want to see and what they want to see not being aligned with who you are.
Yeah, I try my best to be authentic, which Hormozy defines as when what you think, what you say, and what you do are in alignment.
Yeah.
But if that's all within my control, and if I am 100% authentic, but other people perceive me differently, right now, I don't care about that. But if enough people do not see me for that because they want to spread lies and rumors, or even if they're well-meaning people and someone else is lying about me and they don't know what to believe, I'm worried that I'm going to be an authentic person, but I won't be perceived that way, and that I could see punishment as a result of that. Because I do everything that I can to be perceived and to like exude exactly the type of person that I am. But if in the face of that, somebody tries to like lie about it to make me into a false martyr, someone who I'm not, that's scary to me because I'm doing everything right and yet I'm being punished anyways.
Yeah. Last question of this section. How do you think you will rate yourself in the future? Let's say 20 years, give it a timeline.
In 20 years?
Yeah, or in 10 years, whatever you're comfortable with. How do you think you will rate yourself then as a person? And how do you rate your future self now?
Okay, so in the future,
in your future self, thinking as the person you are in your future, right? Solomon, right?
Okay.
How do you think you will rate yourself as a person way in the future?
In 20 years?
Yeah.
Probably an 8 out of 10.
Okay.
I think I'll step back a point because I think I'll realize by then how 9 out of 10 isn't actually 9 out of 10. I think I'll look back and go, okay, 9 out of 10 today was actually 7 out of 10. And if I was that wrong then to call myself 9 out of 10 again would be false. So probably 8 out of 10.
And then how do you rate your future self today in comparison to who you are today?
Like, who do I think I will be?
Right. Like if you're looking at your future self, your future Solomon, and you're going,
Yeah.
whoa, this, and this, and this. Wow. How do you rate that person in comparison to who you are today on a scale of 1 to 10?
In comparison, I think that he will be better.
Or even in general, how do you rate that person? Just from your mental perspective as you are today.
I think he'll be better. But I think that if right now I'm at 90% the capacity of who I'm able to be, he will also be at 90% capacity of what he will able to be.
Interesting.
Compared to now, it's more, but the goalposts move. So right now I am only allowed, like, this is what my capacity is, and I'm 90% of this much. But as I gain experience, that grows to here. And I think that the ratio will stay the same, but the amount will be different. I'll learn more. I'll be more experienced, but I'll be at the same capacity.
Very cool. So that concludes our first 3 sections, where you started, where you were, then where you are today, and finally where you'll be in the future, or anticipate you'll be. This final section is a little game I stole from the Jack Neal podcast.
Okay.
It's called This or That.
Okay.
Essentially, I give you 2 words and you pick one of them, right? You can either explain why or you can just pick one of them. It's up to you, right? But there's a list of 25 different combinations here. We're going to go through each one of them and you're going to pick one of them. You can say why, you don't have to, but that's the game.
Kay had her birthday party at POW on Friday, and it was Hogwarts, like Harry Potter.
Yeah.
So I did the quiz to see what Hogwarts house I was in, and that's exactly what this was. It was like this or that, and it was all timed, and it was like as fast as you could do or wherever. Gryffindor.
I think that's what I was too when I took it.
Yeah, I don't think I have taken it before. Maybe once in like middle school or something, but not since then.
Gotcha.
But everyone was like, "Oh, you gotta do it," because like everyone's all dressed up, and I'm not. We gotta know.
Ready?
Yeah.
Okay. First one. Risk or reward?
Reward, just because I associate them differently. Like when I think of reward, I think of like here's the payout of the risk that you took. And when I think of risk, it's like it's just uncertainty.
Mm-hmm.
That there's not a promise of reward. There's not even like it's like I think of them separately, not together. So reward.
Startup or expand?
Expand. And I think that because starting something from the ground up is really fun and really interesting, but you're not breaking boundaries. So like the Formula 1 team or the Formula SAE team, I was really excited to build on the bones of that car to make it better and improve it. It's like increasing efficiency, not building from the ground up. It's like the business right now. One of the options is, do I build one from the ground up or do I go into other people's and make it better?
First or best?
Best.
Big or small?
Big. Want to be jacked.
Intuition or data?
Data.
Wing it or plan it?
Wing it.
Perfection or production?
Is that like productive? Like
It's as you interpret it.
probably perfection.
Early bird or night owl?
Night owl.
Doing or observing?
Doing. Cuck.
This next one, this next one actually goes into a question that you had earlier. It was in relation to what challenges you anticipate into the future. To push or to be patient?
I'm just picking one. Just based on what resonates with me. Probably push.
Confidence or competence?
Confidence.
Team or individual?
Team.
Front stage or backstage?
Front stage.
Personal or cultural?
Personal.
Bold or wise?
Wise.
Reinvest or dividend?
Reinvest.
Today or tomorrow?
Today.
Adrenaline or peace?
Peace.
Splurge or simplicity?
That's a fun word. Simplicity.
Public or private?
Private.
Outside or inside?
Outside.
Overcome or silence?
Silence.
Burn or quit?
Burn.
Casual or formal?
Casual.
And that concludes our number 39 podcast.
What was that?
It was the this or that game.
What does that do?
I thought it would be fun to add this specifically to this episode because I want to ask you these same questions 5 or 10 years from now
Okay.
in the exact same order with the same options.
Okay.
And
we'll
so
see how they change.
I want to see how they change. I want to see your thoughts about how you answered them today versus how you will answer them in 5 years from now.
Got it.
I thought this would be a really easy way to get a bunch of different topics down and your thought process on about a bunch of different condensed things quickly so that you can look back at this snippet of the podcast and be like, okay, what did I think about 25 different things?
Yeah.
Right. And then in the future, you can play that same game and be like, oh shit, like why did I think about that? And then based on, all of these, this or that, a lot of them had to do with the questions in the first part of the podcast.
Right.
So if you have questions about like, why did I choose this? Like a lot of these tie into previously answered questions. And so you can go back through the questions and be like, oh, that's how I thought about that. I want it as kind of like a marking point for you.
When you read each of those, I had like specific memories or scenes that I had played out. It's either something that I have experienced or something that I hope to experience one day for like each one of the things that you read.
Do you want to go through them again? Do you want to go through any of those memories or scenes?
If you want to, sure.
Sure.
I
Yeah.
don't know.
Let's start from the top. Risk or reward? You chose reward.
Yeah. No, when I think of risk versus reward, risk makes me feel like I don't have control. So I think of the Kiyosaki risk of like how like the more knowledge you have, the less risk there is. So if something feels risky, it's because you don't know enough about it. Don't do it. So when I think of reward, I think of like receiving a paycheck or like checking my phone and there's like a big number. And when I think of risk, I just feel like an uncertainty. Like don't do it. That was less specific of a scenario.
Yeah. Startup or expand?
The SAE team.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Yeah. Fair enough. First or best?
I think of
Are you those best, by the way?
Yeah, it was best, right? Well,
Yeah.
I think of Sir Edmund Hillary. So he's the first person to climb Mount Everest, but he's not the person to do it in the fastest amount of time. So I don't care if I was the first person to do it. I want to be the best person to have done it.
Right. Just like it would be impossible for me to be the first kart racer ever, but if I can be the best ever,
Right.
that's cool.
Yeah.
Intuition or data? You chose data.
Yeah, when I think of intuition or data, I think of someone who's like, they just go with their gut versus someone who's analytical. And when I think of analytical, I want data to back my decisions. If I'm doing something that goes against all of the data, it's very rare for me to do that. It happens, but it's rare.
Yeah. Wing it or plan it? You chose wing it.
Yeah, I was thinking about the first time that I sculled for rowing. So rowing with two oars. You can sit and plan everything out, but at a certain point, you just got to get in the seat and do it. Races aren't raced on paper,
Yeah. Do you, on the next one, I had down perfection or production, and you chose perfection. Do you feel as though the perfection aspect kind of contradicts the wing it part? Or are you thinking about something else?
When I thought about that one, production kind of threw me, and I was like, I don't know. Because they're not like opposites, perfection and production, right? But I kind of thought of it as like quality or quantity. But when I was thinking about perfection versus production, I thought about the difference between Lewis Hamilton and Max Verstappen. Because Lewis Hamilton does a decent job in every race, and that's what has won him championships. But when I think of Max Verstappen, I think of his 2023 Monaco Grand Prix qualifying session, where he was 0.3 down going into the last section, which is the shortest sector at Monaco. And it's the greatest sector to like ever be driven in a Formula One car, I think. And that makes me feel something, not Lewis Hamilton finishing like an average of 5th and winning a championship.
Yeah. I feel like the perfection answer goes along with the best answer too.
Yeah.
Right. Early bird or night owl? You chose night owl.
Yeah, and that's simply because I feel that although I woke up very early for every year that I rode, I feel like I'm more mentally productive when I stay up late.
Do you think that's because you are able to more effectively avoid people and distractions?
No, I think I just because I can avoid people and distractions during the day too. It's just something about it being dark out. I've already gotten a lot of the things I need to be done for the day out of the way.
Mm,
I've already worked out. I've already filled my car with gas. I've already eaten. So I guess you could count those as distractions. Um, but it's not like I'm worried about someone texting me and being a distraction because I'll answer that text. I still have
yeah.
good ideas later in the day. I think it's just that I feel like there's not a huge amount left to do during the day. So I can just focus on what I'm doing.
Yeah. Doing or observing, you chose doing.
Yeah, I kind of thought about bird watchers because you can watch
Mm,
birds day in and day out, but I'd rather be a bird and actually fly.
mm. I was thinking that you were thinking more about the side of like I'd rather take action and fail than think about taking action forever and never try.
That's a good example too.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
that's
That's what I thought that you were thinking.
these are the like, what's the first thing that hits my brain as weird it is as it is, and I remember every one of them from when you called it out live. So,
Yeah.
because like the fucking bird watcher one, it's like that's fucking like I thought about it, I was like that's weird, and then I was like doing, but
And
I get stuck in my head.
yeah, fair enough. Push or patient, you kind of bounce between these two. I circled both, but I ultimately circled push.
Yeah, patience is figuring out what to do in the meantime, right? And I really don't like it because I don't feel productive. And the difference between push versus patience, I had this moment 2 months ago when I got an email from someone at work who I didn't really want to hear from, but they emailed me anyways. And I remember I was eating lunch and I watch YouTube while I eat lunch. So I was like, okay, I'll check the email after lunch. I'll be patient and I'll eat my lunch and I'll enjoy it with the YouTube video. So I took one bite and then I was like, fuck it. This is annoying me. Like, it's just going to bother me if I don't check it. So I'm just going to push through and just read the fucking email. And so I did. And I responded real quick. And then I enjoyed my lunch because I didn't wait. I just took action. Um, and I feel like similarly with like SAE, where it's not likely to happen, I would rather push through and like just fucking work at it and make it happen than wait.
Would you have answered differently if I asked push or pivot?
Um, No, because you only pivot when there's nothing left to push. If you give it 100% and you cannot push anymore, then you pivot. Um, so push.
The next one was confidence or competence, and you answered confidence.
Yep, same deal. Kind of like with the sculling thing with rowing. It's I think that my ability, my belief that I can do it is more important than my actual ability to do it. Because I think that with the ability, but without the faith, it won't get done. But with the faith, and we're not sure about the ability, it'll happen.
Team or individual, you answered team.
Yep, I rode, so I prefer to work with people.
Front stage or backstage, you answered front stage.
Yeah, and I think that's because I have confidence in my ability to perform and to lead and inspire, and I would rather be the one to take the risk of being the face of the company or the production than someone else, because if it goes wrong, I would rather it fall on me than someone else.
Do you think in part in that answer you're maybe laying on um you're putting are you putting your needs to be front stage in order to ensure it goes well above other people's wants to be front stage, or are you putting other people's concerns first by taking on the hit of being front stage? I know that's kind of like an oddly worded question, but
It's the latter. It's more so I don't want to see I don't want to see you fail because I know how you will feel if you fail. Like if the person who goes front stage is going to fail, I want it to be me, not you.
mm,
Right? If the person going on stage is going to succeed, depends on if we're a team or not. Am I competing? Do I want to win or do I want you to win because you're a friend? Right? But I think generally thinking, I think I can do a better job, and I think that even if I don't and I fail, I can handle it better, and I don't want you to see that suffering.
personal or cultural, you answered personal.
Yeah, I don't really care about culture. I kind of just care about like, am I happy with myself? It's like the marriage thing. It's right. Am I happy in my relationship? Because I don't care how other
Mhm.
people perceive my
Yeah.
relationship.
For bold or wise, you answered wise.
Yeah. When I think of bold, I think of like brave and like willing to commit. But when comparing it to wise, I automatically think, well, that's boldness without wisdom is just like foolhardiness.
Cockiness, I guess.
Yeah, kind of. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's like bravery, but with nothing to back it up. It's like the Leroy Jenkins meme. Have you seen that?
Yeah.
But when ultimately my 80-year-old self, I want to be wise.
For reinvest or dividend, you said reinvest.
Yeah, that's like the full send. Like if your business is making money, put it back in the business.
Yeah.
Just like grow the shit out of it.
Kind of goes along with your push answer too.
Yeah.
And your doing answer as well.
Yeah.
Today or tomorrow, you answered today.
Why wait till tomorrow?
Fair enough. Adrenaline or peace, you answered peace.
In my the quad race in my senior year of high school, like the greatest race, or what was supposed to be like the greatest race that I would ever do, I didn't feel an insane amount of adrenaline. I felt more at peace. And I feel like that's what the peak should feel like. I feel like as you approach the peak and the adrenaline rushes, you feel like, oh man, when I get there, it's going to feel insane and it's going to feel wild. And I'm going to have so much adrenaline that like my heart's going to explode out of my chest. But when you actually get there, it's serenity.
Yeah.
So peace.
For splurge or simplicity, you answered simplicity.
Yeah, it's like the movie that I watched where, it's young money versus old money. The young money like does cocaine and parties and like listens to loud music,
Yeah.
rocks out, and simplicity is like, I drove my GT car, my Grand Touring car to a nice restaurant and had breakfast there, and it's quiet,
Yeah. Yeah. Public or private?
private.
Yeah. Kind of goes, you said private and
Oh yeah,
kind of goes along with.
now we're not
something.
asking.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, it's just like I don't feel the need for other people to. It's kind of like I don't care if other people see. I only care if other people bother me about it, right? So like you can watch, like my mom used to take my phone when I would get grounded, and she would like go through all my shit. I don't care.
Yeah.
But like, don't come back to me and complain about dick pics on my phone because I don't want to hear it. Like you took my phone, so you need to suffer and shut up about it because I don't want to hear. I don't want to hear your opinion on my life. You can watch if you want, but fucking leave me alone about it.
For outside or inside, you answered outside.
I just like the outdoors. I grew up racing, rowing, so
Yeah.
on the water, I really miss it on the water. And working in Northrop, I'm fucking in a safe all day. Like the windows are blocked because I work on the first floor, so like everything is fucking. You walk through 15 gated safe doors that have like fucking padlocks and shit on them, and like actual security dials and shit. You badge in everywhere, so like I work deep in the heart of the safe, and I don't see the sun anymore, and I'm fucking deficient in vitamin D from my blood panel. So I just miss it outside.
Overcome or silence, you said silence.
Yeah, I felt that overcoming is trying to prove someone wrong and like being in their face about it. So I feel like if Lando Norris won this championship, he would have overcome everyone calling him like a last lap Lando and Lando no wins and that shit. He would be
Yeah.
like overcoming a public perception of him. Whereas Max Verstappen never cared about what the public said. He just silenced them by putting his head down and doing his work and doing what he does best. I would rather let my success speak for me and just silence everyone than be influenced by what other people think.
Yeah. I kind of thought of this one. You thought of it differently than I did. I thought of it more along the lines of like, if I'm having internal conflict, do I try to overcome that conflict or silence it out?
Right.
Right. Would you have answered it differently if that was the preface?
I don't know, because I don't have a lot of internal conflict. I feel like I would probably prefer to silence it and even regularly do because I still have like thoughts and doubts about my last relationship. But most of the time, like you can't overcome it and like silence it without giving into it. Or I'm sorry, you can't overcome it without giving into it. So like the only way to overcome it would be like to go back to those girls and like, prove them wrong or whatever. And I don't want to be motivated by that. I would rather just silence it and, just tell the voice in my head like, hey, that's past. Focus on what you're doing now.
Mm. Burn or quit, you answered burn.
I'll never quit.
Fair enough. Casual or formal, you answered casual.
Yeah, I think of I used to have bonfires in my parents' backyard with my friends growing up, and I had tons of fun doing that. We were all dressed in like t-shirts and jeans or like a sweater and jeans. Um, and that's kind of what I think of when I think of casual versus formal. I've never really been comfortable in a suit, never been comfortable wearing that type of stuff. I'm just more comfortable when I'm casual.
Yeah. Yeah. So that concludes our podcast.
That's well done.
Yeah. At the end of every podcast, we have a little period where we dial in. I have a rendition of a original quote that we started with as
Okay.
our dial in quote. It's kind of a slight difference from when we've it's a slight difference from the quote that we started this podcast off of. And then you will know what it is, and the audience can maybe figure it out in the future.
Okay.
But our dial in quote for this week is, when life gives you lemons, you don't make fucking lemonade.
Thanks for watching.